Chapter 51-48. Although she couldn't get an accurate answer from Nantian Aurora, no good news meant no bad news at the same time. Previously she was confused because she was worried about Lin Yi, but now that she had recovered, she had always been very confident in Lin Yi. Oh, birds of a feather flock together. Miss Tian-chan is indeed young hero Lin's confidante. She has an extraordinary bearing. Okuda looked at Tian-chan with admiration. With his status and strength, ordinary women would tremble in front of him, not daring to breathe too loudly. It was rare to see a woman with such a bearing like Tian-chan. You flatter me, Okuda Island Master. However, if it's possible, I have another thing that I would like to ask Okuda Island Master for help. I wonder if you can ask the Central Chamber of Commerce to see if they still have the business of sending letters to the secular world? Tian-chan asked. She believed that nothing had happened to Lin Yi, but she also knew that something must have happened after such a long time. If she could send letters through the Central Chamber of Commerce, she would be able to get to the bottom of it. It's a small matter. I'll ask for you. Okuda Island immediately understood what Tian-chan meant. Back then, the Central Chamber of Commerce had publicly auctioned the secular world's acknowledgement letters at the Middle Island auction house. That news had spread like wildfire, and even he had heard about it. However, after that there was no further news about it. It seemed that the Chamber of Commerce had already stopped this business. If Tian-chan went to ask about it herself, it would obviously be useless. But if it was him, it would be different. For the sake of him being the acting island master and the Okuda family behind him, the Central Chamber of Commerce might make an exception this time. In fact, as Okuda Island expected, when his message reached the headquarters of the Central Chamber of Commerce, all the higher-ups of the Central Chamber of Commerce were shocked. In fact, similar inquiries like this were not rare, but just like the answers that Lin Yi received before, they were all rejected. However, this time was different. The one who asked was Okuda Island. They could ignore others, but with Okuda Island's background, even the Central Chamber of Commerce didn't dare to look down on him. After all, he was a real super family. In particular, the headquarters of the Central Chamber of Commerce was located in Middle Island, and Okuda State was now the leader of Middle Island. If they made this big boss unhappy, it wouldn't be a good thing for them. Everyone discussed it over and over again, but in the end, they still did not dare to make a decision on their own. They could only report this matter to their superiors. As a result, it was reported level by level and finally, it was passed on to Wuxia, the Okuda prefecture. Why would this guy want to send a letter to the secular world? Could it be that the super families of the Heaven Stage Island have already started to set their sights on the secular world? Wuxia's subconscious reaction was that the great aristocratic families were about to make a big move. After all, this was the time when the Archaic Alliance would come into being. It wasn't strange for the unfathomable forces of Heaven Stage Island to become restless. But after thinking about it carefully, it was unlikely. The power of the Central Chamber of Commerce was deeply rooted in the secular world. Any force that wanted to develop in the secular world couldn't completely escape their surveillance, including the Heaven Stage Island. Not to mention that if these great aristocratic families really had the ability to develop in the secular world, they wouldn't need to ask them to help send a letter. After pondering for a moment, Wuxia finally decided, sure, do him a favor and make an exception to send a letter for him. In any case, there have been frequent communications with the secular world recently, adding another letter is not a bad idea. Soon, Okuda State received a positive answer. Tian-chan and the others couldn't help but be overjoyed. After repeatedly thanking Wuxia, they quickly wrote a letter and sent it to the Central Chamber of Commerce through Okuda State. As for the name of the recipient, it was naturally Lin Yi. Lin Yi? So that's how it is. It's a favor that doesn't cost much. Wuxia immediately understood, but she was still a little shocked. Even a character like Okuda State was willing to come forward for Lin Yi. Lin Yi's power really couldn't be underestimated. At the same time, Wuxia looked at the other letter on her desk. This was a letter from the Common World's headquarters. Coincidentally, Wuxia was asking about Lin Yi at the same time, so they bumped into each other. The Central Chamber of Commerce's headquarters was originally normal, but when a letter suddenly appeared on the transmission platform, and they discovered that it wasn't an internal letter, but an express letter marked with the sender and recipient, the members of the Central Chamber were immediately shocked. What? There's another express letter from Heaven Stage Island? Wuxia couldn't help but be surprised after receiving the report. The Central Chamber of Commerce's express service was personally stopped by her main body, Wuxia. Why did it suddenly start again? From the perspective of cost and profit, this business was actually a rare low-cost high-profit business. After all, even without this business, the Central Chamber of Commerce often had to communicate between Heaven Stage Island and the secular world. Moreover, the Central Chamber of Commerce had to regularly purchase goods from the secular world, so this express service was purely incidental. It could be said that there was no cost. But the problem was that in the long run, this was not a good thing for the Central Chamber of Commerce. Because with the powerful strength of the super forces on Heaven Stage Island, once they got the slightest clue, it wasn't unimaginable to take the opportunity to extend their hands into the secular world. The reason why the Central Chamber of Commerce could rise so quickly was because of the complete isolation between Heaven Stage Island and the secular world. If this isolation was broken bit by bit, it would be a fatal blow to the Central Chamber of Commerce. After all, without the gimmicks of technological products, the Central Chamber of Commerce's foundation was much worse than other local chambers of commerce like the Hong Chamber of Commerce. What's more, after the isolation between Heaven Stage Island and the secular world was broken, it would even have a huge impact on the entire strategy of the Central Chamber of Commerce. In contrast, the spiritual jades were just a small profit, not worth mentioning. Others didn't know this inside story, but Lan Xiaoru was clear about it, which was why she was so surprised. Especially when she saw the recipient of the express letter, she was even more shocked. Lin Yi. Lan Xiaoru couldn't help but frown. Along with the express letter there was an explanation. It was a letter written by the main body, Lan Xiaoru. After reading it she finally understood. It turns out that this guy's spirit was projected here. Even the big shots of Heaven Stage Island have to give him face. He's really not simple. Although she had long noticed the existence of Lin Yi, she never thought that Lin Yi could reach such a level. After understanding this she couldn't help but feel a little creeped out. She wanted to use Brother Dafeng to keep Lin Yi hanging, but now it seemed that she was simply playing with fire. Chapter 5149. However, since Lin Yi was such a figure, Lan Xiaoru did not dare to make a decision on her own. She hurriedly wrote down Lin Yi's situation in the secular world and the progress of the Archean plan in the secular world, and sent them to Heaven Stage Island together, asking if they wanted to deal with Lin Yi. Although Lin Yi's strength was not to be underestimated, he was only a primordial spirit that had been projected over, and not the main body. With the secular world as the center, it was not impossible to deal with him with their current strength. After all, in terms of strength alone, Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng were more than enough. A day later Lan Xiaoru received a reply from the main body, Lan Xiaoru. After reading it she could not help but be even more shocked. What is the background of this Lin Yi? He actually wants the main body to take responsibility personally, and even I am not allowed to intervene? If it was just to not let her intervene it would be fine, but the key point was that the letter actually said that not only could this Lin Yi not be dealt with, but absolutely could not let anything happen to him. Otherwise, Professor Li would be under a lot of pressure. Lin Yi was a key figure related to the whole situation, and must not die for the time being. In the letter, Lan Xiaoru also said that if there was a chance, it was best to think of a way to rope him in. Even if it could not really rope him in, even if it was just a superficial show of affection, it was best to temporarily maintain a good relationship with Lin Yi, and must not rashly start a conflict, let alone magnify the conflict. This was an absolute order, and any slight violation would be severely punished. The letter made Lan Xiaoru break out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, she did not make a decision on her own and do anything stupid, or she would have made a huge mess. Compared to the main battlefield on Professor Li's side, the Archean plan that she was leading now was not worth mentioning at all. If she really ruined Professor Li's plan, it would be a crime that could not be redeemed even if she died 10,000 times. However, Lan Xiaoru did not point out Lin Yi's true identity in the letter. This matter was of great importance, and with Lan Xiaoru's current status, she did not have the authority to know such a confidential matter. Therefore Lan Xiaoru could not help but feel a little baffled. However, since Lan Xiaoru had said so, she could only do as she was told. She immediately passed on the instructions from the higher-ups, especially to Dr. Glasses immediately. Although she had only planned to use Brother Dafeng as a mole, to keep Lin Yi in suspense, she could not obey the orders of the Emperor when she was out in the field. If something unexpected happened, Dr. Glasses might change his strategy at the last minute. After all, he did have the strength to do so. Time passed day by day in the transfer region of the archipelago. Regardless of whether it was those prospective disciples who had just joined the sect or those disciples who were already at the foundation establishment stage, everyone was doing their best to cultivate. The only difference was that the former did it for the sake of being able to stay, while the latter did it for the sake of the primordial refinement. Looking at the tense atmosphere of everyone's hard work, Lin Yi felt as if he had returned to the time when he first arrived at the northern island. It was the same back then and everything was still vivid in his mind. Just thinking about it made him feel nostalgic. Of course, with Lin Yi's current situation he didn't need to train like the others. It was just a projection of his primordial spirit, and before he could think of a way to return to the golden core stage, training was useless. Instead of that, he might as well take the opportunity to familiarize himself with the various abilities of the primordial spirit. On the other hand, while Lin Yi had given them sufficient foundation establishment pills, there was no way for them to directly increase their strength. Their strength didn't come from their own hard work, and their foundation wasn't strong enough. As a result, their leveling speed wasn't as fast as expected. This was something that could not be helped. Most people would start to break through the barrier after reaching the peak of Heaven Stage Great Circle, but they had already reached the peak of Heaven Stage Great Circle 3 years ago. Since then they had been stuck in this realm without making any progress. Coupled with the lack of foundation, it was much more difficult for them to break through to foundation establishment than ordinary people. Fortunately, their foundation wasn't strong enough, and they had the golden core to make up for it. Plus, this was a transfer island with thick spiritual energy. Just from the external conditions alone, they were already blessed. Plus, there was no lack of people with good potential, and while not everyone seemed to be able to break through successfully, a few of them were close to breaking through. It wouldn't be long before they heard good news. At the same time, the operations of the bespectacled doctor were also progressing. However, after making a good start with Bing Wuxia and Shui Jianfeng, they did not make much progress in the past month. At least, it was much worse than what they had expected. After all, they had to move in the dark, and they didn't dare to be too obvious in order to avoid attracting attention. From locking on to potential development targets, to gradually getting closer and closer to them, and finally to formally recruiting them, they had to be very careful with every step in between. One mistake and the matter would be leaked, and that would be very bad. It's been a whole month and we've only managed to recruit 2 people. This is too slow. Mysterious man in black, aren't we being a little too careful? Dafeng Bro complained. This is a serious matter. We can't be too careful. Don't be impatient. The glasses professor was the one who was most eager to achieve something, but he was surprisingly patient this time. In fact, it was mainly because Lan Xiaoru had specifically reminded him when he went out to report the progress last time. Since they absolutely couldn't provoke Lin Yi, they couldn't reveal any flaws in this kind of poaching. Otherwise, even if they did not poach Lin Yi's people, it was likely to develop into a head-on confrontation with Lin Yi. That would go against their original intention. But if we continue to develop at this rate, when will our manpower really grow? It's not as good as when we were catching lone experts outside. I'm afraid it'll be hard to explain if the higher-ups ask, right? Dafeng Bro asked curiously. It's okay. That was then and this is now. It's much more difficult to move around here than outside. We've already expected this and the higher-ups won't blame us. Moreover, our center hasn't really shown our true strength so far. It's not easy to rope people in with just a few words. Let's take it slow. The glasses professor sighed. Bing Wuxia and Shui Jianfeng were special cases. They were both disabled, and it was naturally easy to rope them in when they were completely disheartened. However, the other disciples of the Archaic Alliance were different. Even if they had a grudge against the Archaic Alliance, it was not so easy to rope them in. Unless the person sent to persuade them had a close relationship with them, it would be difficult to persuade them. Chapter 5150. As for the other one, it was Jing Yueming from the Thousand Blades faction, who was recruited by Jing Taiyang. They were cousins, and Jing Yueming's situation in the Thousand Blades faction was much worse than Jing Taiyang's. He was basically on the verge of being kicked out of the faction at any time, so it was easy for Jing Taiyang to persuade him. Apart from these two, the other targets were still at the stage of getting close to them. They were still very far away from actually recruiting them. This was very normal. After all, everyone was usually cultivating. Even fellow disciples rarely had the chance to gather together, let alone truly friendly ones. In such a situation, the precondition of having a grudge against the Archaic Alliance was naturally very low. Moreover, the people of the Archaic Alliance were extremely wary. If one didn't have a good relationship with them, then it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It was reasonable to only be able to rope in 2 people a month. Time flew by. 3 months had passed since the prospective disciples entered the transfer island. On this day, Xianijia gathered everyone on the small island where the teleportation formation was located. Although the island was not big and was only a small place compared to the real islands, it was more than enough to accommodate hundreds of people. After everyone had arrived, Xianijia said loudly, everyone, 3 months have passed. I believe all the prospective disciples of the far ancient sects have become familiar with the environment here, and their strength has made great progress. Many of you are on the verge of breaking through. I congratulate you, but you still have to keep up the good work and strive to break through the Foundation realm as soon as possible. Don't let down the expectations of your senior brothers who lead your sections. Yes, everyone replied in unison. There's one more thing which is also the main reason why I gathered everyone here today. After such a long time, I believe everyone should have heard about the archaic trials, right? Xianijia asked. Everyone nodded. This wasn't a secret. Even these prospective disciples from the mortal world could learn about it from their senior apprentice brothers or other senior apprentice brothers. After all, the primeval smelting trial was something that all disciples of the Archaic Alliance looked forward to the most. Every few days someone would mention it, so it was impossible for them not to know. Very well. So from tomorrow onwards we will prepare for the archaic trials, Xianijia announced. Prepare? What preparations? Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Could it be that he was reminding everyone to properly increase their strength before the primeval trials began? It was said that this time's primeval trials were extraordinary. If one's strength wasn't enough, then rashly joining was no different from courting death. Of course, for these prospective disciples, the most important thing was to break through to Foundation establishment. Otherwise, they wouldn't be considered members of the Primeval Alliance. As for the primeval trials, that was even more nonsense. Don't get me wrong. The preparation that I'm talking about isn't about your personal affairs, but the preparation of all of us. To enter the primordial trial, we need spiritual jades to activate the teleportation formation. This teleportation formation has been sealed for a long time. If we want to activate it again, we will need a huge amount of spiritual jades. If we can't meet this condition, the teleportation formation won't be activated. Then our chances of entering the primordial trial will be ruined, Xianijia explained to the crowd. Spiritual jade? Where can I get this? Now, not only the prospective disciples, but also the disciples of the primordial sects were also looking at each other. They weren't the higher-ups of their sects, nor did they have any powerful background. How could they possibly get something as rare as spiritual jades? Moreover, it wasn't a small amount. Don't worry. According to the records of the Primordial Alliance, there's a spiritual mine under the sea of this archipelago. Although it's not that easy to mine, I believe it shouldn't be a problem for all of you. Therefore, from tomorrow onwards, everyone here will have to volunteer to mine the spiritual jades at the spiritual mine under the sea. Otherwise, you won't be qualified to participate in the primordial trial. Do you understand? Xianijia said loudly. Elder Xen, do we have to confiscate all the spiritual jades that are mined? Someone raised his hand and asked. This was also a question that almost all the disciples were concerned about. Even if the primordial trials were disregarded, just the spiritual mine at the bottom of the sea was already quite a big temptation to them. If the spiritual jades that were mined could belong to them, most of them would definitely not be lazy. That's not it. Considering everyone's enthusiasm, as long as there's more than one spiritual jade mined on a day, the rest will belong to each of you. Xianijia smiled and said. The rules sounded rough and seemed to have a lot of loopholes. However, it was only a stopgap measure after all. It was enough to motivate everyone. He believed that they would be able to collect a lot of spiritual jades in the end. Sure enough, everyone's eyes lit up after hearing the rule. The condition didn't sound harsh at all, but it was still very tempting. However, there were still a few people who frowned. Many of them were on the verge of breaking through. It was a waste of time to participate in the undersea mining at this time. After all, mining might not bring them any harvest. A hard day's work might still be in vain. Of course, in order to take care of everyone's cultivation, the undersea mining will be divided into 2 groups. They will take turns every 3 days. If anyone doesn't want to go when it's their turn, they can be exempted once as long as they pay 1 spiritual jade. Does anyone have any objections? Xianijia asked. Everyone shook their heads. This arrangement was already very humane. It would be difficult to raise any objections. Moreover, if they didn't participate, they would not be qualified to participate in the primordial trial. No one dared to take this risk. Wait. At this moment, Shui Jianfeng suddenly stood out and glanced at Lin Yi's group with ill intentions. Since everyone is going, shouldn't these people go as well? They're not disciples of the Archaic Alliance in name, and they didn't say that they had to participate in the primordial trial. Naturally, they can choose not to go. Xianijia shook his head. Ling Shan and Wu Qintian were on the verge of breaking through to Foundation establishment, and naturally they wouldn't go to the undersea mining. Plus, as Xianijia said, they didn't plan on participating in the primordial trial. The undersea mining this time had nothing to do with them. Nothing to do with them? How could it be nothing to do with them? They're taking the island's resources for nothing, and when it's time for them to contribute, they don't give a shit. That's not going to convince the others, is it? Shui Jianfeng humphed coldly. But Xianijia still wanted to retort, but the other disciples of the archaic sects were already grumbling. They all had to work hard to mine, and only Ling Shan and the others were free. It was indeed annoying. At that moment, Lin Yi suddenly stopped Xianijia and walked up to Shui Jianfeng under everyone's gaze. You want all of us to go mine, right? That's right. Shui Jianfeng said confidently. Alright, you're right. Lin Yi nodded and threw out a huge box. The moment he opened it, everyone's eyes were blinded. It was filled with spirit jade. This. Shui Jianfeng and the others were tongue-tied, speechless for a while. Here, these are all leaf slips. If it's not enough, you can ask me for more. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Ling Shan and the others had quite a number of people, but one piece was enough for them to be excused once. This huge box of spirit jade was enough for them to take a few months of leave. Chapter 51-51. Everyone looked at the huge box of spiritual jades and gulped, including Xianijia, who already knew that Lin Yi was rich. He couldn't help but be stunned again. Even Bing Wuqing, who had been expressionless, showed a little bit of emotion. She was not an ordinary disciple who had never seen the world, but even she was shocked by Lin Yi's generosity. This guy is really not simple. Bing Wuqing couldn't help but take another look at Lin Yi. Since coming out of the Archaic Alliance, this was the first time she met Lin Yi. She only knew his name because of what happened to Lung Lung. The only person she hated and feared was Lin Dongfang. As for Lin Yi, he was nothing in her eyes. To be precise, he didn't have any sense of existence. However, from this moment on, Lin Yi had some status in her eyes. Not to mention other things, just the fact that he could take out so many spiritual jades at once was already an impressive thing. This was a manifestation of strength. Of course, it was just some status. Not to mention that he was now a late-stage golden elixir master. Even if he was an early-stage golden elixir master, he wouldn't really take a perfect foundation establishment master seriously. At most, he was just a slightly stronger ant. If that's the case, there shouldn't be any more objections, right? Xianijia said to Shui Jianfeng. Everyone was looking at him as if they were watching a joke. Shui Jianfeng's face immediately turned red. He wanted to continue making things difficult, but that big chest of spirit jades was really too eye-catching. Money makes the world go round. What kind of nonsense could he say in this kind of situation? Very well. Next, I'll announce the group list. The first group will start mining in the afternoon, and 3 days later, it will be the second group. Since there are no objections, let's go with this, Xianijia announced at last. Nominally, Lin Yi and the others were in the first group like the other disciples of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. It was just that Ling Shan and Wu Qintian had already used the huge box of spiritual jades to apply for leave. After a while, Xianijia was ready to lead the first group to the underwater mine. However, he was stunned when he turned around. Uncle Master, are you going down too? I don't have anything to do anyway. I'll follow you down to take a look. Lin Yi nodded. He might look like he didn't care, but he did care about this mine quite a bit. After all, the people from the Archaic Alliance wouldn't be staying here for too long. Once the training in the common world was over, the mine would be ownerless, and Ling Shan would be able to organize people to continue mining. Of course, the premise was that the quality of the underwater spiritual mine must be high enough. If it was the kind of waste or that could not produce a few pieces of spiritual jades in half a month, it would be useless. After all, Lin Yi was not short of spiritual jades. Oh, got it. Xianijia immediately understood Lin Yi's intention. After all, the benefits should be kept within the family. Instead of letting the spiritual mineral mine benefit others, it was better to let this grand uncle master benefit from it. Lin Yi smiled faintly, not explaining. The archipelago wasn't deep in the sea, and the spiritual mineral mine was almost on the extension of one of the islands. The water depth was only 10 meters or so. With diving equipment, this level of depth was nothing to a normal person, let alone these strong practitioners. Of course, Xianijia wouldn't provide them with any diving equipment. He only had some basic mining tools, so they had to rely on themselves to breathe. It seemed a bit troublesome, but it wasn't a problem that was hard to overcome. Practitioners had a long breath, and as long as they mastered the technique of breathing underwater, they could stay at the bottom of the sea for a long time. Under Xianijia's lead, the group went into the sea and soon arrived at the spiritual mineral mine. Lin Yi looked around and was disappointed. It looks like even if it's not a waste or it's not far from it. Linny shook his head. Although he hadn't officially excavated it, he had mining experience in the North Island, so it wasn't difficult to distinguish good ores from waste ores. Judging from the concentration of spiritual qi in this spiritual mineral mine, if one was lucky, one might be able to pick up 2 or 3 pieces of spiritual jade a day. Otherwise it would be difficult to pick up even 1 piece. It wasn't too bad for the other disciples who had to participate in voluntary work, but it was worthless in Lin Yi's eyes. After saying goodbye to Xianijia, Lin Yi was ready to leave. When he came to a deserted place, he habitually transformed into the form of the primordial spirit. This was his main practice in recent months. Not only could he increase his immediate combat capability, but he could also master all kinds of primordial spirit skills when he returned to the Heaven Stage Island in the future. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. However, as soon as he returned to the sea, he saw Shui Jianfeng and another person slacking off by breathing. However, Lin Yi was now in the form of the primordial spirit. As long as he was a little careful, ordinary people wouldn't be able to find him under the cover of the seawater. Even Shui Jianfeng, an expert in the early stage of the Gold Core realm, was no exception. "Brother Qin Yuan, have you thought about what I told you last time?" Shui Jianfeng asked. The 2 of them deliberately chose the most remote place. At this time, only the 2 of them were breathing on the sea within 100 meters. In addition, he had the perception of an expert in the early stage of the Gold Core realm, so he wasn't afraid that someone would come close and eavesdrop. However, he didn't know that Lin Yi was floating behind him. This. The other person hesitated and didn't answer. "Qin Yuan?" Lin Yi was slightly stunned when he heard the name. He didn't recognize him before, but he had some impression of the name. This person was a disciple of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. His strength was in the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm. He had seen him several times, but he didn't talk to him. However, since Qin Yuan was a disciple of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, with the current tense relationship between Shui Jianfeng and the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, why would this guy be with Shui Jianfeng? After just a moment of confusion, Lin Yi quickly understood. This was most likely because Shui Jianfeng wanted to secretly draw Qin Yuan to his side on behalf of the center. With the convenience of practicing the primordial spirit skills, Lin Yi had been monitoring the movements of the Glasses Doctor and the others almost every day recently. Naturally, he knew their movements like the back of his hand. Even Qianlong of the Ancient 5 Elements sect and Jing Yueming of the Thousand Blade sect had been put on the key monitoring list by Lin Yi. Although he didn't plan to provoke the center for the time being, he had to at least get hold of the list just in case. Chapter 51-52. On the other hand, Qin Yuan from the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island had stayed together for a few days during the sect exchange. They got along quite well. The most important thing was that Qin Yuan once complained to him about the unfair distribution of cultivation resources. Moreover, Qin Yuan's dissatisfaction with the sect didn't diminish. Instead, he became more and more resentful. Qin Yuan was a perfect target to win over. Seeing that both Bing Wuqing and Jing Taiyang had managed to rope in people to their side, and only he had not made any progress, it would be a lie if Shui Jianfeng said that he was not anxious at all. In terms of ambition, he was far more ambitious than Jing Taiyang, so he was naturally anxious to achieve success. "Are you still hesitating at a time like this?" Seeing Qin Yuan's expression, Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but feel a little anxious. He tried to persuade him patiently, "Something happened to your uncle. You don't have any background in the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. I don't need to tell you how many cultivation resources you need to reach the Elixir realm, do I? With your current situation in the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, do you think you have a chance, Brother Qin Yuan?" No. Qin Yuan shook his head decisively. At his level, the most important thing was to break through to the Golden Elixir realm. However, without sufficient cultivation resources, especially without a Golden Elixir or Golden Elixir, it would be a fool's dream. That's why I said, a tree will die when it moves and a man will live when he moves. Since you know that there's no future if you continue like this, why do you still insist on hanging yourself on a tree until your death? Shui Jianfeng earnestly advised. That's true, but isn't he going to betray the sect? Qin Yuan still couldn't make up his mind. Even though he had a deep grudge against the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, the education he had received since he was a child was deep-rooted. To the orthodox concept, betraying the sect was almost intolerable. Most people didn't have the guts, and Qin Yuan was no exception. It's not as serious as you make it out to be. Right now you're just secretly relying on them. There's no need for you to do anything to betray the sect. No one will know. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly dispelled his doubts and tempted him. Think about it, as long as you follow me, I guarantee you'll be able to break through to the Golden Core realm in a short period of time. At the very least, you'll be able to reach Foundation Paragon in an extremely short period of time. This is equivalent to tens of years of bitter cultivation. Really? How short is extremely short? Qin Yuan's eyes lit up. One day, Shui Jianfeng was delighted. The last time he said this, Qin Yuan did not have such an excited reaction. This meant that he was not far from success. What? One day. Qin Yuan was so shocked that he almost sank into the water. He had to swallow a mouthful of water before he could recover. Brother Qin Yuan, do you know what level I am at right now? Shui Jianfeng suddenly asked in a pretentious manner. Isn't it Foundation Establishment Great Circle? Qin Yuan was stunned. He only knew that Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng had suddenly consumed elixirs to recover. Like the others, he did not know their true abilities. Shui Jianfeng snorted proudly. Taking advantage of the fact that there was no one around, he released his aura without holding back. Qin Yuan was immediately stunned. He stammered, Golden Core Stage. That's right, it's the Golden Core realm. Now, you should understand what it means to follow me, right? Shui Jianfeng smiled proudly. All right, I'll go with you. Qin Yuan immediately nodded without hesitation. He had already been convinced. Now that he had seen Shui Jianfeng as a living example, there was no reason for him to hesitate. Very good, but not now. Leaving without permission will arouse suspicion. Let's wait for the rotation. Shui Jianfeng was overjoyed. 3 days later, Shui Jianfeng brought Qin Yuan to Professor Glasses. After consuming the improved elixirs produced by the center, his abilities skyrocketed and he quickly became a Foundation Establishment Great Circle expert. However, he did not successfully break through to the Golden Core stage. After all, even Shui Jianfeng had only broken through from Foundation Establishment Great Circle to the early stage of the Golden Core stage. Qin Yuan was not as talented as him, so it was normal for him to fail to break through to the Golden Core stage. Of course, even if he did not succeed in breaking through to the Golden Core stage, as long as he consumed the improved elixirs produced by the center, Qin Yuan would be on the same boat as Bing Wuqing and the others. He would not be able to get off the boat even if he wanted to. After being on the boat, although Qin Yuan was reluctant, he had no choice but to come back and find a way to secretly recruit other seniors and juniors to join the center. Otherwise, if Professor Glasses did not give him the antidote, his life would be in danger. This is a little unreasonable. Linny saw all of this. With the intention of not interfering with each other's business, he could turn a blind eye to the fact that Professor Glasses and the others secretly recruited disciples of other far ancient sects. However, now that even the North Island's Green Cloud sect was being targeted, he could not continue to sit back and do nothing. After all, the North Island's Green Cloud sect had a deep relationship with him. They could be considered half one of his own. If Qin Yuan was the only one secretly betraying the center, it would be fine. However, the point was that he would continue to recruit other seniors and juniors. If he allowed this to continue, a large number of people might suffer in the end. That would be a huge joke. Lin Yi wanted to get rid of Qin Yuan, but he was afraid of killing him and alerting the enemy. After thinking for a long time, he finally decided to capture him first. On this day, Qin Yuan was looking for a candidate among his seniors and juniors. He found a junior that he had a good relationship with. Just as he was about to strike up a conversation with him, he was suddenly stopped by Lin Yi. "Granduncle, what can I do for you?" Qin Yuan was a little flustered. After all, he had no interaction with Lin Yi. For Lin Yi to suddenly call him, that made him feel an inexplicable sense of foreboding. "Oh, I need your help with a small matter. Can you come with me?" Lin Yi said calmly. "Help? Do you want me to call Uncle Xan?" Qin Yuan asked cautiously. "There is no need. He is busy supervising the seabed mining. Don't bother him with such a small matter. You can do it alone," Lin Yi said. He did not give Qin Yuan a chance to refuse. He turned around and left. This. Qin Yuan hesitated for a moment. In the end, he bit the bullet and followed Lin Yi. As a traitor, he was most afraid of being seen through. In the face of Lin Yi's request, even Xan Yijia had to be careful with him. If he rejected Lin Yi's request, it would definitely be suspicious. For the time being, he could only take one step at a time. Fortunately, he was now a master with the great completion of the Foundation Establishment realm. Even if he could not defeat Lin Yi, who was also with the great completion of the Foundation Establishment realm, he would at least be able to protect himself. There should not be any accidents. Chapter 51-53. What? Qin Yuan was scared out of his wits when he heard that. He was horrified. How did this guy know about the center's improved version of the pill? I've already made it so clear. What's the point of continuing to play dumb? Linny could not help but laugh. Yo, how did you know? Qin Yuan asked subconsciously. His joining of the center was a very secretive matter. Other than the glasses professor, Brother Dafeng and Shui Jianfeng who developed him, there should not be a fourth person who knew. However, from Lin Yi's tone, why did it seem like he knew everything? The archipelago is only so big. Do you think it's flawless? Lin Yi studied the man from head to toe. At first glance, the man looked honest and kind, but it was a little deceitful. A line popped up in Lin Yi's mind. Who would have thought that a guy with thick eyebrows and big eyes would betray them? I don't understand what you mean. After Qin Yuan reacted, he carefully looked around. He did not see anyone, but he did not give up. He pretended to be calm and asked in a deep voice, "What do you want?" Hehe, you're still pretending to not want to leave behind any evidence. I really admire your spirit. You won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. Linny nodded. The expression on his face was very playful. He was just short of saying that Qin Yuan's shamelessness reminded him of his youthful charm. Granduncle, I only call you granduncle out of respect for your seniority. This does not mean that I can tolerate your unreasonable behavior. You'd better behave yourself. Qin Yuan frowned. He checked again and again to make sure that no one would pass by. The island was not big, but there were less than 30 people gathered on the island. Moreover, they were gathered at the Two Spirit Eyes. Normally, no one would pass by such a remote place. Interesting. What if I don't behave myself? Lin Yi laughed fearlessly. Then don't blame me for being rude. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Yuan attacked without any warning. He used his strongest attack without holding anything back. If Xanijia was on the island, he would not have the guts to do so. He might really be forced into a corner by Lin Yi. However, Xanijia was far away at the spiritual mine, so he still had a chance. As long as he killed Lin Yi before anyone found out, he would be able to do so without anyone noticing. Qin Yuan's voice was cold. His body was like a snake, and Qin Yuan's speed was extraordinary. In the blink of an eye he was next to Lin Yi. He used a whip kick as a feint. After he attracted Lin Yi's attention, he immediately used a hidden elbow. This was his most proud move. Once he hit, he could easily break the Qi defense and crush the enemy's bones. He had succeeded. Seeing that Lin Yi did not move, Qin Yuan suddenly thought that Lin Yi had been shocked by his sudden attack. He could not help but feel happy. As long as the first move of the bone-crushing kill hit, he could immediately use the second move, the third move, and the fourth move until all of his opponent's bones were crushed. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi suddenly said, "Oh? The concept of this move is not bad. However, when you use it like this, it is really a mess." "You are talking big." Qin Yuan laughed coldly. At that moment, his elbow attack was only a hair's breadth away from Lin Yi's back. He was about to hit Lin Yi. This so-called Grandmaster was nothing more than this. However, at the last moment, Lin Yi's body moved an inch to the right. He used the vital energy spray technique to put some distance between himself and Qin Yuan. His entire body immediately became like a snake, twisting strangely and extremely fast. This is... Qin Yuan was dumbfounded. He could not help but have a bad feeling about this. Why did his opponent's movement seem so familiar? Before he could react, Lin Yi had already turned the tables on him. He used a whip kick as a feint, then followed it up with a hidden elbow attack. Crack. Qin Yuan quickly heard the sound of his ribs breaking. His entire body was instantly drowned in pain. He fell to the ground powerlessly. As he spat out blood, he struggled to say, "Bone? Crush? Kill?" That is why I said that this kind of martial arts technique falling into your hands is like casting pearls before swine. Don't you feel bad for it? Lin Yi spread his hands. Qin Yuan was speechless. Before this, he had thought that the other party was just boasting. However, the other party had only watched it once and was able to imitate the Bone Crusher kill. The power of the Bone Crusher kill was much stronger than the original version. How could he argue with that? Qin Yuan was shocked. They were both experts who had completed the foundation establishment stage. Why was there such a huge difference in power? Qin Yuan wanted to cry, but he had no tears. If you want to fight or kill, just do it quickly. Qin Yuan resisted the urge to spit out more blood. He was paralyzed on the ground as he spoke weakly. Although he had been secretly lured by Shui Jianfeng to join the group, he still showed some courage in the face of death. If it was as simple as fighting and killing, I would have done it a long time ago. Why would I waste so much time talking to a traitor like you? Lin Yi looked at him condescendingly. What else do you want? Qin Yuan's heart went cold when he looked at him like that. The courage he had just displayed disappeared. Nothing much. Doing some research might not be a bad thing for you. As Lin Yi spoke, he suddenly squatted down and placed his hand on Qin Yuan's head. A warm wave of true energy flowed into Qin Yuan's body. Qin Yuan was scared out of his wits. It was a very dangerous thing to have true energy forcefully inserted into one's body. Furthermore, this was the head, which was the weakest part of his body. He didn't dare move. If his opponent's true energy ran amok, even if he didn't die on the spot, he would become an idiot. However, to Qin Yuan's surprise, his opponent's true energy didn't run amok. It didn't destroy his body. Instead, it gave him an indescribable feeling of comfort. It was as if it was searching for something in his body. A moment later, the warm vital energy entered Qin Yuan's dantian. What shocked Qin Yuan the most was that the vital energy forcefully forced out the poisonous gas that came with the improved version of the elixir. This was the main thing that the center was relying on to threaten them. From the moment he discovered this poisonous gas, he had been trying to force it out and neutralize it. In fact, it wasn't just him. Shui Jianfeng and the others were doing the same. However, including Bing Wuqing, who was the strongest among them, none of them were able to force this deeply hidden poisonous gas out, let alone neutralize it. Chapter 51-54. Qin Yuan nervously observed what was happening in his body. He did not even dare to breathe. He was shocked and confused. What was Lin Yi trying to do when he had suddenly taken out the poison gas that had been hidden so deeply? What happened next made Qin Yuan's heart jump out of his throat. Lin Yi's pure qi was in his dantian, and it was fighting against the poison. The two pure qi were very strong, and it made Qin Yuan's dantian turn upside down. Qin Yuan wanted to die, but he couldn't. He was in so much pain that he rolled around on the ground and screamed. Qin Yuan was in so much pain that he wanted to die. After an unknown amount of time, Qin Yuan felt as if his entire body was about to fall apart. The unparalleled pain finally faded away. After surviving the disaster, Qin Yuan's entire body was soaked in cold sweat. His entire person was exhausted. It looks like your willpower is not bad. You were able to survive this. Lin Yi was a little surprised. Seeing that Qin Yuan was confused, he said, "Since you are still alive, take a closer look at the situation in your body." Qin Yuan was stunned. When he looked at his elixir field again, his face was filled with joy. Lin Yi's warm true qi had been slowly retracted. The poison gas in the improved elixir field had disappeared. This was not surprising to Lin Yi. His 5 elements killing aura was almost invincible among all true qis. Even at the level of the 5 poison dragon, it was still very useful. Although the poison gas in the improved elixir field was difficult to deal with, it could not escape the fate of being killed. Thank you, sect uncle. Qin Yuan quickly came back to his senses and kowtowed to Lin Yi. He had thought that he was going to die. He had not expected things to turn around. Lin Yi had gotten rid of the poison gas that had threatened his life. It was very unexpected. "Why are you thanking me?" Lin Yi found it funny. "Of course, this is to thank Martial Granduncle for saving my life. In the future, this disciple will definitely follow Martial Granduncle's lead and will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire." Qin Yuan quickly expressed his loyalty. He was not a fool. Lin Yi's intentions were very clear. After discovering his betrayal, he did not kill him. Instead, he helped him get rid of the poison gas. Without a doubt, Lin Yi wanted to use him for himself. The first time Qin Yuan was dragged into this mess by Shui Jianfeng, he was still hesitant. However, this time he was very decisive. Since he could betray the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, now that the poison gas was gone, he could easily betray the center and join Lin Yi's faction. After all, if Lin Yi wanted him dead, it would be too easy. He didn't even need to do it himself. One word would be enough. "Oh, you seem to have misunderstood. I have no intention of saving you. I'm just doing my research. Now that I am done with my research, it is time to send you on your way." Lin Yi curled his lips. "What? Let's go?" Qin Yuan was scared out of his wits again. That day his emotions were like a roller coaster. No matter how strong his heart was, it could not withstand such torment. Qin Yuan no longer cared about his pride. He kowtowed to Lin Yi and begged for his life. At this time, his pride had been worn away by the pain. He was willing to do anything to live. Qin Yuan was already half dead from the torture. After begging for a long time, he was lying on the ground, unable to get up. Seeing him gasping for breath, Lin Yi said, "Fine. I've always been a soft-hearted person. Since you're so sincere, I might as well spare your life." Qin Yuan looked at Lin Yi. "Really? Thank you, Martial Granduncle, for saving my life. I will never forget your kindness." Qin Yuan was overjoyed. "But..." Lin Yi only said 3 words and Qin Yuan's heart was in his throat again. He continued, I can't let you go just like that. To be honest, I don't trust a guy like you who has a history of betrayal, not to mention that you've betrayed us twice in a row. Qin Yuan's face turned red when he heard this. Although it was the truth, a man needed his pride. Furthermore, he had just betrayed the sect not long ago. His skin was not thick enough to be impervious to fire and water. However, in order to survive, he quickly asked, Please tell me. It is very simple. The people in the center do not trust you, so they use poison gas to control you. I do not trust you either, so I have to put a curse on you. Lin Yi coldly said. He was going to use the same method he had used on Wei Xinjing. This was the only way to deal with people like Qin Yuan. If he did not, he would be bitten by Qin Yuan sooner or later. Curse. Qin Yuan's eyes were wide open. He could not help but scream in his heart. He had escaped from the wolf's den and entered the tiger's cave. You do not want to? Then I will not force you. I will send you on your way. Lin Yi looked indifferent. Seeing that Lin Yi was about to attack, Qin Yuan panicked. He quickly begged for mercy. No, no, no. I am willing. I am willing. This is what I should do. Martial Granduncle, please put a curse on me. Qin Yuan wanted to cry, but he had no tears. Lin Yi wanted to put a curse on him, but he had to beg for mercy. Wasn't this fucking cheap? Lin Yi thought it was funny. Just as he was about to put the curse on Qin Yuan, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Wait. Qin Yuan was overjoyed. His savior was here. However, before he could start to feel happy, the voice said again, With your level of skill, you have the nerve to cast goo on others. Let me do it lest you make a mistake and embarrass yourself. In terms of attainments in goo, you are still worlds apart. Thump. Qin Yuan's knees turned to jelly, and he fell to the ground again. This roller coaster ride was full of ups and downs. His heart could not take it. The person who spoke was Lin Dongfang. Lin Yi turned to look at him and asked, Why are you here? Nonsense, Lin Dongfang said angrily. You made this guy cry like a ghost and disturbed my afternoon nap. How could I not be here? We are 7 or 8 miles away. How could I disturb your afternoon nap? Lin Yi was speechless. Although Qin Yuan was tormented quite badly just now, he was holding back his cries and howls. His voice wasn't that loud. It would be strange if he could still affect Lin Dongfang like that. I have good ears and eyes. Lin Dongfang snorted and casually patted Qin Yuan's shoulder. Then he said, Done. Done. Qin Yuan could not help but be stunned. He thought that the curse would be very painful. He did not expect Lin Dongfang to casually pat him and it was over. Chapter 51-55. Impressive. Others might not have been able to tell, but Lin Yi was a knowledgeable person. He was shocked by Lin Dongfang's move. Old Lin was old Lin. He was unfathomable. Learn from him in the future, kid. Lin Dongfang glanced at him, then looked at Qin Yuan on the ground. What do you plan to do with this guy? Qin Yuan's heart trembled when he heard that. Lin Yi's next answer would determine his life and death. Although Lin Dongfang wouldn't kill him directly, and Lin Yi had just promised to spare his life, if Lin Yi asked him to do something that he didn't want to do, he would still be dead in the end. What do I do? Of course, I have to go back to where I came from. Otherwise, all my efforts would have been wasted. Lin Yi grinned. Go back to where? Qin Yuan was stunned. Ask yourself. The center worked so hard to raise you from a foundation establishment late stage to a foundation establishment full mastery, shouldn't you repay them? Lin Yi said with interest. How do I repay them? Qin Yuan was confused. Simple. You just have to continue working for them. Make them feel like they didn't find the wrong person, Lin Yi said. That's it. Qin Yuan looked at Lin Yi in disbelief. Even if he used his toes to think, he knew that Lin Yi didn't want him to continue working for the center. Oh, I understand now. Master, you want me to be a spy for you. Is that what you're trying to say? Lin Yi nodded. Wrong. Lin Yi shook his head. Huh. Qin Yuan was dumbfounded. He said weakly, Didn't you want me to be your spy? What do you want me to do? Other than being a spy, he couldn't think of any other reason Lin Yi would let him live. This was the best arrangement for him. After all, if the center found out about his betrayal again, he wouldn't be far from death. To be precise, being a spy is the basic condition for your survival, Lin Yi said. If you want to fight for your future, you have to put in more effort. Future? Do I still have a future? Qin Yuan was shocked. Now that he had been reduced to such a state, he felt that it was a blessing from the heavens to be able to keep his life. He did not dare to think about more. He did not even dare to think about his future. Don't you need it? Do you think you'll be satisfied just because you've reached the Foundation Establishment Great Circle? Forget it then, pretend I didn't say anything. Lin said casually. No, 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 Qin Yuan hurriedly said. Although I am not ambitious, I am ambitious. If there is anything you need me to do, just tell me. I will do my best to help you, Qin Yuan hurriedly said. That sounds pretty good. Alright then, go and trick Jing Yueming into coming here. Let him come here. Remember, don't let anyone know. Lin immediately said. This was the real reason why he had deliberately kept Qin Yuan alive. If Qin Yuan was just a spy, it would be worthless to him. After all, he already had Big Brother Feng, who was of a higher level. Qin Yuan's greatest value was to secretly instigate a rebellion. Jing Yuming? Who is Jing Yuming? Qin Yuan was stunned. In order to ensure secrecy, the people in the center only contacted each other one-to-one. Apart from the people who were online, under normal circumstances, only the Glasses Professor and Big Brother Feng knew. The others did not know each other and they did not meet each other. Therefore he did not know Jing Yueming at all. Similarly, Jing Yueming did not know him. He is a disciple of the Thousand Blades sect. He is also a member of the center who secretly defected to the center, Lin said. Although there were more than 20 Archaic Alliance experts under the control of the center, the number of targets he could instigate was very limited. After all, Jing Taiyang and the other 15 Foundation establishment experts had been brainwashed by the center's drugs. It was not easy to instigate them. Apart from Qin Yuan, there were only 4 people who stood a chance. They were Bing Wuqing, Shui Jianfeng, Ken Long, and Jing Yueming, who were also threatened by the poisonous gas in their dantian. Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng were Golden Core experts. They were not easy to deal with. The only easier targets were Ken Long and Jing Yueming. Really? Qin Yuan was delighted. He quickly nodded and said, All right, I will act now. Remember, you have to pay special attention to avoid Jing Taiyang. He is the one who developed Jing Yueming. If he finds out, you will be finished. Also, the goo that the old man gave you is not simple. No one in the world can remove it except him. If you have any distracting thoughts, you will also be finished, Lin said, looking at him. I understand. Qin Yuan was full of confidence. He had a distant relative in the Thousand Blades sect. He had been to the Thousand Blades sect before and knew many people. Although he did not know Jing Taiyang or Jing Yueming, it should not be difficult to trick them. Looking at Qin Yuan's back, Lin Dongfang suddenly said, You are so at ease to let him go alone? What else can I do? I can't go with him, can I? Lin smiled and said indifferently, This kid is not stupid. He cherishes his life and is afraid of death. He is the most suitable person for this kind of thing. It will be best if there are no accidents. If there are any accidents, I will just take it as a warning to the people in the center. Aha, you are quite good at comforting yourself. Lin Dongfang laughed. After half a day, Qin Yuan returned with Jing Yueming behind him. Seeing that they were walking further and further away, Jing Yueming could not help but ask, Tell me, what is the secret mission? Why did you bring me to the northern island of the Green Cloud sect? Why does Jing Taiyang have to avoid me? Jing Taiyang was his superior and they were cousins. There was no reason that Jing Taiyang did not know about the mission. However, since Qin Yuan knew about the Glasses Doctor and the others, it meant that they were on the same side. But what kind of secret mission was this? You will know when you get there, Qin Yuan said without turning his head. Wait. Jing Yueming suddenly stopped. He looked at Qin Yuan warily and said, Who are you? Why did you bring me here? Even now you're still doubting my identity? Qin Yuan turned around and looked at him in disbelief. Then, he continued to walk forward with an indifferent expression. If you have doubts, it doesn't matter if you go back now. No one will stop you. However, if the higher-ups ask about it later, don't blame me for telling them the truth. Chapter 51-56. This. Jing Yueming hesitated. The calmer and more indifferent Qin Yuan appeared, the easier it would be for him to believe him. Forget it. Since you look pleasing to the eye, I will say one more thing. Joining the center means you have a new start. Under normal circumstances, you will always be the one going online. That is because you will always be the one going online if you earn some merit. However, this secret mission is a rare opportunity. If you are willing to let Jing Taiyang walk all over you, then pretend I did not say anything. After Qin Yuan finished speaking, he walked away without hesitation. What Jing Yueming said hit the nail on the head. It was true that he and Jing Taiyang were cousins, and it was also true that he was Jing Taiyang's underling. However, every time he saw Jing Taiyang's arrogant look, he wanted to walk all over Jing Taiyang, but he never had the ability to do so. Now the opportunity was here. Okay, I will go with you. Jing Yueming made up his mind and quickly followed Qin Yuan's footsteps, but he froze after a while. The people in front of him weren't the glasses doctor or Dafeng Bro, but Lin Yi and Lin Dongfang. Not bad. You did not disappoint me. Keep up the good work. Lin Yi smiled. Okay, so who is next? Qin Yuan was very self-aware this time. Not only did he want to live, but he also wanted to fight for his future. Plus, this kind of thing was almost risk-free. At least, it was much easier than fighting and killing. It would be a waste not to take the merit that was given to him. Ancient Five Elements Sect, Bright Dragon, Lin Yi said casually. Understood. Qin Yuan heard this and immediately set off again. Jing Yueming, who came with him, was dumbfounded. What was going on? Jing Yueming looked at Qin Yuan, who was leaving, and then looked at Lin Yi and Lin Dongfang. He was confused. You are also from the center? Lin Dongfang looked at Jing Yueming in amusement. I'm not afraid of not knowing what's good. I'm just afraid of comparing goods to goods. Before this, I didn't think much of Qin Yuan. But now I feel that you, kid, have a good eye. At least you aren't like this. What do you mean by silly? Jing Yueming still didn't know what was going on, and thought that Lin Yi and Lin Dongfang were the same as him, people who joined the center in secret, especially since these two were masters that couldn't be found in the common world. The only explanation was that they joined the center in secret. There was no other explanation other than the center's improved elixir. Stop talking nonsense. Lin Yi did not want to explain to the idiot who had been tricked. He stepped forward and sent a 5-element murderous aura into Jing Yueming's head. Jing Yueming was only a master in the late stage of the foundational realm, so he could not fight back at all. He fell to the ground in pain and fainted. Compared to Qin Yuan, Jing Yueming was much stronger. Lin Dongfang took care of the poison in the Dantian, and Lin Dongfang placed the poison into the Dantian himself. The whole process went smoothly, and what happened after that was even simpler. Jing Yueming wasn't just a piece of trash, he was even more afraid of death than Qin Yuan was. Lin Yi hadn't even finished his sentence when Jing Yueming knelt down. After Qin Yuan was Jing Yueming, and after Jing Yueming was Qianlong. Lin Yi used this method to defeat them one by one. He had secretly subdued all three of them. The progress was surprisingly smooth. What are you going to do next? Do you want to find more people or do you want to wait? Lin Dongfang asked. Let's see how it goes. Lin Yi said after some thought. According to what he knew, the doctor and the others were very careful. Other than one-on-one training sessions, they'd also send these people to their temporary base for body checks. He didn't know if they'd find out what he'd done to Qin Yuan and the others, but he'd only be able to move forward if he passed this obstacle. Sure enough, a few days later, Qin Yuan was taken out by the bespectacled doctor alone for a physical examination. On one hand, it was to collect data and send it back to the center to improve the pills. After all, they were all human samples that were hard to come by. On the other hand, it was to monitor everyone's physical condition. If the poison showed signs of going out of control, they would be able to detect it in advance. If they found something that should not be in their bodies, they would not be able to escape from such comprehensive and strict monitoring. What Lin Yi did was not only get rid of the poison in their Dantian, but he had also planted a curse in their brains. Although Lin Dongfang had done it secretly, it was still a big problem whether or not he could escape the detection of the center's high-tech equipment. Even Lin Yi was not sure about this. He could only wait for the results. Fortunately, the news that Qin Yuan brought back was good. The test results were normal from beginning to end. There were no abnormalities found. Lin Yi was still a little worried, but Jing Yueming and Qianlong reported the same results. He finally felt relieved. It seemed that the center's physical examination could not really lock onto the poison in one's Dantian. It could only be discovered after the poison showed signs of going out of control. As for the faint traces of the curse, even Qin Yuan and the others could not detect it. It was reasonable that the center's high-tech equipment could not detect it. After all, it was Lin Dongfang's doing. This result not only made Lin Yi heave a sigh of relief, but Qin Yuan and the others were even more shocked. Before this, they thought that they were just unlucky to be targeted by Lin Yi. To be honest, they did not think that Lin Yi was very powerful, especially when compared to the mysterious center. They were not on the same level at all. However, after experiencing the physical examination personally, their preconceived notions were completely overturned. Lin Yi could easily get rid of the poison in the center. On the other hand, the center could not detect any abnormalities with the curse that Lin Yi had asked Lin Dongfang to plant on them. It was obvious who was superior. It looks like the situation is not bad. How is it? What's the next move? Lin Dongfang asked with interest. Since the center wants to cause trouble in the dark, let's play with them. They develop one and we will instigate another. Let's see who wins, Lin Yi said with a faint smile. That's interesting. Apart from Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng, according to what you've said before, they're the only ones who are really using poisonous gas to control the three of them. If this goes on, you'll soon become half the boss of the center, Lin Dongfang said with a laugh. Isn't that good? With me, the boss behind the scenes, they will not go around harming others. Lin Yi smiled and said, That's right, old man. I will need your help next. I cannot handle it alone. You are not thinking of attacking Shui Jianfeng, are you? Lin Dongfang guessed. Chapter 51-57. Bing Wuqing? Ah, you sure have a big appetite, kid. Lin Dongfang was overjoyed when he heard that. He had already heard that Bing Wuqing was now an expert in the late golden elixir realm. Such a level was already unimaginable in the secular world, and most people would avoid her like the plague. He did not expect that Lin Yi would actually want to subdue her in secret. Not only was his appetite big, but his courage was also frighteningly big. Don't forget that Lin Yi's current realm was only that of Foundation Establishment Great Completion. Just SOSO. Lin Yi did not think much of it. It was true that his current strength was not as good as Bing Wuqing's, but one should not forget that his real body was at the late-stage Mysterious Ascension realm. His true strength was comparable to a Grandmaster-level expert. Forget late-stage Golden Elixir, even late-stage Nascent Soul would not be able to make him feel the slightest bit of fear. He would only want to subdue her even more. Then how are you going to lure him here? Are you going to send Qin Yuan or Canlong? I don't think there's much hope, right? Lin Dongfang said with a frown. Although he had only fought with Bing Wuqing once, it was enough to tell that Bing Wuqing was not as simple as she seemed. This kind of person was completely different from Jing Yueming and Canlong. It was impossible to lure her here for no reason. Neither. Lin Yi shook his head. Then we're going to visit him personally? Lin Dongfang asked in surprise. That's even more out of the question. We'll be too conspicuous if we go to other small islands. We'll definitely be discovered. Lin Yi shook his head even more. After the previous incident, he and Lin Dongfang had already become celebrities. Every move they made was being watched. The most important thing for this kind of thing was to be discreet. If the people in the center found out about it, then all their previous efforts would be in vain. This won't work, that won't work either. Kid, think of a way yourself. Lin Dongfang curled his lips and said, Don't worry, I've already thought of a way. But I'll have to trouble you to write a letter. Lin Yi smiled. What letter? Lin Dongfang asked. Letter of challenge. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Although Bing Wuqing seemed to be emotionless, she was definitely the kind of person who would die of pride. A person like her would never let a single failure go easily. Her crushing defeat at the hands of Lin Dongfang was a humiliation that she had to wash away. Especially now that her strength had been reborn, this fellow must have been dreaming of getting rid of that humiliation. It was just that she could not find the right opportunity. More accurately, she could not make up her mind. Lin Yi believed that as long as Lin Dongfang's letter of challenge was delivered, Bing Wuqing would definitely cast aside all her worries and come forward for the battle. After all, from the other party's point of view, he must have absolute confidence, and only lacked an opportunity. Good lad, you're quite good at scheming. Lin Dongfang immediately understood Lin Yi's meaning. He immediately found a pen and paper and wrote 4 big words. If you don't accept it, let's fight again. Lin Yi picked it up and scrutinized it for a long time. Finally he sighed, These words are so fucking ugly. Are you itching for a beating? I'm imitating the style of a famous writer. I'm blind. Lin Dongfang scolded. It's ugly, but it's still worlds apart from what I've seen on the Heaven Step Island. That's the real deal, while yours is simply unsightly. It's better to write less in the future lest people laugh at you. Lin Yi said seriously. He was naturally referring to Shanghai Tianhua, who was one of the top calligraphers on Heavenly Island. Ordinary people could not compare to him. Lin Dongfang was furious, but before he could do anything, Lin Yi had already disappeared. He could only murmur bitterly, Is it really that ugly? Can't be. Lin Yi would not personally deliver the letter, or it would easily attract attention. Of course, he could not let Qin Yuan and the others do it, or Bing Wuqing would easily suspect him. Therefore, he randomly found a disciple from the north to deliver the letter. After all, he was the Grandmaster who even Xanijia had to be respectful to. It was just a matter of a few words. As Lin Yi expected, after Bing Wuqing received the unsigned letter of challenge, she almost did not hesitate and directly came to him. There was no one else within a radius of a few miles, only Lin Dongfang, Lin Yi, and Bing Wuqing. I didn't expect you to actually send me a letter of challenge. Bing Wuqing did not even look at Lin Yi. She directly walked towards Lin Dongfang. In her eyes, this was the only strong enemy. She was defeated in one blow when she was in the early stage of the Gold Elixir realm. Now that her strength had been reborn, she naturally wanted to avenge herself. Wait. Lin Yi suddenly reached out to stop her. What? Bing Wuqing frowned and glanced at Lin Yi. Right now she could not wait to fight Lin Dongfang. Anything else would be a hindrance. I have nothing to do. Why don't you play with me first? Lin Yi said with a grin. You. Bing Wuqing's disdain was written all over her face. Not to mention that she was now an expert in the late stage of the Gold Elixir realm. Even back when she was only in the early stage of the Gold Elixir realm, she would not have really taken Lin Yi seriously. After all, Lin Yi's strength was only in the foundation building realm on paper. Overestimating yourself, huh? Lin Yi did not take it to heart at all. He knew very well that with his current strength, he was no match for Bing Wuqing. His original body might have been able to fight against the late stage of the Gold Elixir realm when he was in the foundation building realm at the foundation building realm, but it was unrealistic for this primordial spirit. However, he had not been stuck in the foundation building realm for so long in vain. This was a good opportunity to try out an ability that he had recently mastered. What do you think? Bing Wuqing still had no intention of making a move. However, she released her signature merciless ice force, which was at least tens or even hundreds of times stronger than before. Even an expert in the foundation building realm who was in the foundation building realm would find it hard to withstand such a heavy pressure. But Lin Yi's face was indifferent, not showing any signs of discomfort at all. He spread his hands and said calmly, "Is this considered a start?" Bing Wuqing was stunned. She did not expect Lin Yi's original body to be in existence comparable to an expert in the magnate realm. Although the merciless ice force was a special aura that was integrated with vital energy, it was still an aura at the end of the day. Suppressing a freak like Lin Yi with just an aura was not something that an ordinary expert in the magnate realm could do. A mere expert in the late stage of the Gold Elixir realm should just wash up and go to sleep. Interesting. I'll play with you then. A strange look flashed in Bing Wuqing's eyes. She moved and immediately attacked Lin Yi. Her speed was at least top-notch among experts of the same level. However, what surprised her was that Lin Yi's speed was much faster than hers. Even though she had already unleashed her full power, she could not catch up to the corner of Lin Yi's clothes. So this is all you've got? Lin Yi could not help but feel a little disappointed. Bing Wuqing's temperament was extraordinary. He had thought that she would at least be an expert who could make his eyes light up, but it turned out that she was only SOSO. Chapter 51-58. Today he was brimming with confidence as he sought revenge on Lin Dongfang. If he couldn't even handle Lin Yi, who was merely at foundation building great perfection, then what was the point of doing anything? Before he finished speaking, an ice wall suddenly appeared around Lin Yi, forming a 1-meter-wide ice prison in the blink of an eye, trapping Lin Yi within. Oh, that's not a bad move. Lin Yi nodded. In fact, he had already sensed the vital chi fluctuations around him the moment the ice prison appeared. With his speed, it wouldn't be difficult for him to escape if he gave it his all. However, he wanted to test out his new ability, which was why he stayed behind. But then again, this ice prison of Bing Wuqing's was extremely fast. Even if an average person could react in time, they wouldn't have the speed to escape, especially when they had to face the pressure of the merciless ice at the same time. It was indeed difficult to deal with. Are you really not afraid of death? In the blink of an eye, Bing Wuqing had already arrived in front of Lin Yi. Although the ice prison wasn't indestructible, the moment the person inside broke out of the prison, he would definitely reveal a flaw, which was more than enough for her to kill him. Will you kill me? Lin Yi stood with his hands behind his back. He had no intention of breaking the ice prison at all, and just looked at her indifferently. I'll give you a word of advice. People who think they're smart usually die a horrible death. Bing Wuqing's murderous intent immediately intensified. The bespectacled professor had indeed said not to provoke Lin Yi for the time being, but he had only mentioned it once and hadn't told them any deeper details. He could usually abide by it, but now that Lin Yi had delivered himself to his doorstep, he couldn't blame him for being impolite. At most, he would just be punished by the center afterward. Then go ahead. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Die. Before Bing Wuqing finished speaking, her hands had already turned into a pair of indestructible, sharp ice claws. They moved at an incredible speed, and a white light flashed past, piercing through the ice prison and Lin Yi's body without any suspense. Can we start now, Lin Dongfang? Bing Wuqing did not look at Lin Yi again. She turned around and walked towards Lin Dongfang. As for Lin Yi, whose chest had been pierced by her ice claws, he was already dead. Since he was already a dead man, what was there to see? However, before he could take a step forward, Lin Yi's nonchalant voice suddenly sounded behind him. Hey, isn't it a little too early for you to be so confident? How could this be? Bing Wuqing's eyelids twitched and she subconsciously turned her head to take a look. Immediately, she was dumbfounded by what she saw. Lin Yi, whose chest had been pierced by her, was completely unscathed. There wasn't a single wound on his body. Could it be that what happened just now was an illusion? Bing Wuqing herself did not notice it, but Lin Dongfang, who was standing beside her, saw it clearly. He could not help but look a little surprised. This brat is quite good. He can switch between the primordial spirit state and the primordial spirit state in an instant, and he can even control the switch in a certain area. If used well, this is an incredible ability. It seems that these few months have not been in vain. Just as Lin Dongfang said, the moment Bing Wuqing's ice claws touched his body, Lin Yi instantly switched that part of his primordial spirit state to the primordial spirit state. Therefore, even though his chest was pierced through, he did not suffer any damage. This was the new ability that he had been trying to figure out recently. Although it was only at the initial stage, he could not completely switch between the primordial spirit state and the primordial spirit state in an instant. He could only control a small part of it for now, but even so, it was already no small matter. This could be seen from the shocked expression on Bing Wuqing's face at this moment. In theory, Bing Wuqing, a late-stage golden elixir expert, had an overwhelming advantage, be it in terms of realm or strength. After all, Lin Yi was not like he was on Heaven Stage Island now, where he could not fight an opponent of a higher realm than him. However, at this moment it was Lin Yi who had the upper hand. The iconic merciless ice aura was completely ineffective from the start. Immediately after that, although he had trapped his opponent with an ice prison, he was not injured at all after the ice claws pierced through his chest. Faced with such a strange opponent, even Bing Wuqing could not help but feel a little helpless. How can this be? Who exactly are you? Bing Wuqing did not dare to act rashly at once. She could not help but recall the scene where she was beaten to the ground by Lin Dongfang in a single move. An inexplicable sense of foreboding began to linger in her heart, and she could not get rid of it. Leave this question for later and slowly explore on your own. Alright, old man, now it's time for you to get down to business, said Lin Yi as he clapped his hands. Brat, you sure know how to order people around. Lin Dongfang curled his lips exasperatedly. Although he said that, he did not hesitate for even a moment and walked straight towards Bing Wuqing. Even though Lin Yi looked like he was invincible at the moment, he was still just a full-fledged foundation-building cultivator at the end of the day. At the very most, he could only contend with Bing Wuqing. As for defeating her, it was almost impossible for him to do so at the moment. Seeing that these two people did not take her seriously at all, Bing Wuqing was instantly infuriated. She was indeed shocked by Lin Yi's miraculous technique just now, but it was absolutely impossible for her to have any intention of retreating. Otherwise she would not be Bing Wuqing. You deserve to die. Bing Wuqing immediately attacked with all her might without holding anything back. The range of the merciless ice aura was condensed to an extremely small area, but its strength increased by more than a few times in an instant. Even the surrounding ground showed faint signs of sinking, and its power was evident. However, Lin Dongfang walked in so easily. Just like Lin Yi, he did not show any signs of being oppressed by the merciless ice aura at all. Instead, he strolled leisurely until he was 2 steps in front of Bing Wuqing, raised his hand and threw an ordinary punch. This punch clearly looked ordinary and unremarkable. Instead, it was extremely slow, and at first glance, it didn't seem to have any strength at all. Even an ordinary hooligan would be much more ferocious and powerful than this punch. However, it was such an ordinary punch that caused Bing Wuqing's expression to change drastically. He did not manage to see Lin Dongfang's punch clearly the last time they exchanged blows. He only felt that the punch was extremely powerful at the moment he was hit. This time he finally saw how the other party threw the punch, but that was all. Faced with Lin Dongfang's extremely ordinary punch, Bing Wuqing was so stunned that she could not put up any resistance. It was not that she did not want to, but that she could not move at all. At this moment, her entire body had been suppressed by the punch that was as heavy as a mountain. The clearer she could see it, the more irresistible this kind of pressure was. In comparison, her merciless ice aura was like a child in the presence of a great wizard. Chapter 51-59. However, Lin Dongfang's punch didn't land on her face. Instead, he stopped at the last moment and asked calmly, "Do you still want to fight?" "There's no point in fighting anymore." Bing Wuqing shook her head with a bitter smile. This punch was enough to make her realize the huge gap in strength between them. Although she didn't know what realm her opponent was at, and didn't even know if her opponent was a cultivator, because she hadn't sensed any fluctuation of vital energy from the beginning to the end, she already knew that there was no hope for her. "Wanna watch?" "That's fine. It'll be troublesome if I really injure you." Lin Dongfang nodded. He knew that Lin Yi could heal people quickly, but this punch of his would definitely injure Bing Wuqing badly. Even Lin Yi couldn't heal her in a short period of time, and it would be easy to arouse suspicion. "What do you mean?" Bing Wuqing frowned. Although she had been full of resentment ever since she was crippled, the moment she realized the huge gap between them, the resentment immediately dissipated. This was human nature. Hatred only existed between people of similar levels. Once they were on completely different levels, there would only be respect and fear left. Hatred and the like would naturally become fleeting clouds. "What I mean is that I'll give you a new boss. Why don't you consider it?" Lin Yi walked over and said with a faint smile, "Don't worry. I can deal with the poisonous gas that the center is using to threaten you." "Are you kidding me?" Bing Wuqing's face darkened. She was shocked. How did this guy know about these things? "You'll know soon enough whether I'm kidding or not. Wanna watch?" As Lin Yi spoke, he reached out with one hand and used the killing aura of the 5 elements to strangle the poisonous gas hidden in the other party's dantian with ease. With Lin Yi at the side as a deterrent, although Bing Wuqing resisted, she didn't dare to break away from Lin Yi. When Qin Yuan and the others were strangling the poisonous gas, they were all in so much pain that they wanted to die. However, other than looking a little pale, she didn't make a sound. "Who the hell are you?" This was the second time Bing Wuqing had asked such a question in such a short period of time. She was shocked to find that the poisonous gas that had rendered her helpless had actually been cleanly dealt with by Lin Yi in such a short period of time. Such methods were simply unimaginable, not to mention the miraculous skills that he had displayed previously. Truly unfathomable. "As I said earlier, I'll leave this question to you. I believe you won't be disappointed." Lin Yi couldn't help but smile. He then said, "I know you were forced to join the center. Now that the threat of the poisonous gas is gone, why don't you make a new choice?" "Do I have any other choice?" Bing Wuqing asked in return. "You're smart, no?" Lin Yi's answer was very straightforward. If the other party was given a second choice, then why would he waste so much effort? Ever since he arrived at this transit island, Bing Wuqing had always been one of his main targets to monitor. In the end, the result was that this person was very rational and pragmatic. She had no standpoint to speak of. This could be seen from the fact that she had agreed to join the center without any hesitation. It was precisely because of this that he had made Bing Wuqing his target. Bing Wuqing fell silent. Her gaze swept between Lin Yi and Lin Dongfang. Lin Dongfang's unfathomable abilities? Needless to say, even with his current abilities of the late Golden Elixir stage, he couldn't muster up the will to fight against him. As for Lin Yi, although he appeared to be only at the foundation building great completion, he had an endless variety of miraculous skills. He was also an unfathomable character. Faced with such an unfathomable duo, coupled with the situation as Lin Yi had said, he indeed had no second choice. Unless he died. After a while, Bing Wuqing said, "What do you want me to do?" "Simple. Stay in the center and be my spy," Lin Yi said. "All right," Bing Wuqing agreed readily. "Very good. You are indeed a sensible person. But to be on the safe side you have to suffer a little." Lin Yi nodded and immediately asked Lin Dongfang to cast a spell on him. This was within Bing Wuqing's expectations, no matter what she thought. No matter what he thought, he didn't show any signs of resistance on the surface. Instead, he was very cooperative. But after Lin Dongfang cast the spell on him, he was shocked again. He sighed inwardly. These two guys were indeed extraordinary. After Lin Yi had explained some things to take note of, Bing Wuqing stood up and left. But before she left, Lin Yi suddenly stopped her and threw an elixir at her. "Consider this a greeting gift. Perform well in the future." "Golden elixir? And of the highest grade?" Bing Wuqing's eyelids twitched. The golden elixir was the dream elixir for all foundation building consummation experts and golden core experts, especially when it was of the highest grade. The impact was even greater than the improved version of the elixir he had received from the center. Although the effects were more direct and terrifying for a knowledgeable person like him, the value of the highest grade golden elixir was definitely not small. Looking at Bing Wuqing's silhouette as she left without saying a word, Lin Dongfang suddenly said, "Why are you so generous to this guy? He's worth it. Don't you think so, old man?" Lin Yi asked in return. "He's not bad." Lin Dongfang was non-committal. At least compared to the other disciples of the Archaic Alliance, including Xianijia, the uncle master who was leading the team, Bing Wuqing was obviously much better in all aspects. Her aptitude was also top-notch, so it was indeed worth investing some capital on her. Anyway, I don't lack elixirs. The others don't need them and you don't want them. Just treat it as giving him a taste of the benefits first, Linny said lightly. What do I want this for? What's the use of it? Lin Dongfang snorted disdainfully at his elixirs. Linny was speechless. If he released any of these elixirs, not to mention in the secular world, it would cause a sensation even in the heaven-level island. But in the end they were worthless in old Lin's eyes. Instead, he had a look of disdain on his face. He really didn't know what to say. Alright, let's talk about the next step, Lin Dongfang said casually. Alright, let's not think about Shui Jianfeng for now. Next, I plan to look for Jing Taiyang and the others to do some research. Although they are brainwashed and controlled by the center, which is not as simple and direct as the poisonous gas, they might be able to find a way, Linny said. That would be best. After all, a total of 15 foundation building experts is not a joke. After all, this is only the secular world, Lin Dongfang nodded and said. Chapter 5160. Why did you go to the Blue Cloud clan's territory in the North Island for no reason? The doctor in glasses frowned and asked. He didn't pay attention to people like Qin Yuan at first, but Bing Wuqing was the expert he valued the most. He paid close attention to her every move, and he would know immediately if there was any sign of trouble. To challenge Lin Dongfang, Bing Wuqing said calmly. Lin Dongfang? Why did you challenge him? Didn't I tell you not to provoke Lin Yi? The bespectacled professor jumped in fright. Lan Xiaoru had warned him over and over again not to provoke Lin Yi. This was an order from the top, and now Lan Xiaoru was challenging Lin Dongfang. Wasn't she just looking for trouble for him? I didn't provoke Lin Yi. I just challenged Lin Dongfang. Bing Wuqing shook her head. Lin Dongfang and Lin Yi are one and the same. Can't you see that? The doctor in glasses was furious. He admired Bing Wuqing and was willing to give her enough freedom to do things on her own. But this matter had crossed the line, and it was even related to his own future in life. He couldn't help but get angry. Bing Wuqing remained silent. The doctor in glasses was angry for a long time before he said, Fine, fine, fine. I know you hate Lin Dongfang to the core. After all, you were defeated by him. Now that you're strong, it's understandable that you can't hold back your thoughts. But this is an order from the top. If anything happens, even I can't protect you. Tell me what's the result. Lin Dongfang's strength was also a mystery. To some extent he was even more mysterious than Lin Yi. It wouldn't be a bad thing if they could take this opportunity to find out Lin Yi's strength. Of course, the premise was that they couldn't really provoke Lin Yi. After all, the top was still counting on them to show goodwill and even to rope in Lin Yi. It didn't work. Bing Wuqing wasn't stupid. Since she had chosen to rely on Lin Yi, she couldn't reveal Lin Dongfang's strength. Moreover, she really didn't know Lin Dongfang's specific strength. She only knew that he was unfathomable and she was no match for him. Why? The doctor in glasses frowned. If he doesn't accept the challenge and Lin Yi is standing next to him, there's nothing I can do. Bing Wuqing pushed all the blame away. She was not afraid that the bespectacled professor would send someone to inquire about this matter. Even if he did, he would not be able to find out anything. After all, she had not really fought with Lin Yi or Lin Dongfang. She had only stopped where she was and did not make much noise. No one else knew about it at all. If that's the case, then forget it. I'm still very confident in you, but remember, don't do it again, okay? The bespectacled doctor pretended to be persuasive. Yes, Bing Wuqing replied with a nod. Also, you need to put in more effort to win over the Archaic Alliance's disciples. The current progress is too slow. It's not ideal. The bespectacled doctor was halfway through his sentence when he saw Shui Jianfeng walking over. He couldn't help but be startled. He didn't summon this guy? Leader, I have something to report in private. What do you think? Shui Jianfeng looked at Bing Wuqing hesitantly. Then, the bespectacled doctor paused for a moment, then nodded and said, All right, I have nothing else to tell you. Bing Wuqing, you can go back first. After Bing Wuqing had left, Shui Jianfeng said, Leader, I think Bing Wuqing went to the Blue Cloud sect on the North Island previously. It wasn't your idea, was it? No, but I've already asked him. The bespectacled doctor glanced at him and said, That Qianlong and Jing Yueming also went to the Blue Cloud sect on the North Island. Do you know about this too? Shui Jianfeng asked. They went too. Did Qin Yuan tell you about this? The bespectacled doctor was shocked. If it was just Bing Wuqing alone, it would not have been a big deal. After all, the reason was sufficient, and there was nothing to be suspicious about. But now that so many people had gone to the Blue Cloud sect on the North Island, and all of them had gathered at the same time, it was necessary to be on guard. You've misunderstood. Qin Yuan might be my spy, but I, Shui Jianfeng, am still one of the top figures in the Archaic Alliance. Now that I've recovered my strength, there are bound to be some familiar faces in the various sections. It's not difficult for me to know what's going on. Shui Jianfeng deliberately showed off. Really? Then why didn't you show it before? If you have such a wide network, why did you only recruit Qin Yuan after such a long time? The bespectacled doctor frowned and said, Hey leader, you've misunderstood. This is a different matter. Although I have a wide network and I can pass on a message when I meet them, I don't have any deep relationships with these people. How would I dare to recruit them rashly? If something goes wrong, wouldn't that be a bad thing? Shui Jianfeng explained. That's true. How are Bing Wuqing's connections? The bespectacled doctor asked. Compared to Shui Jianfeng, he obviously admired Bing Wuqing more. This was an obvious fact. Shui Jianfeng's expression froze. This time he had specially come not just to snitch on Bing Wuqing, but mainly for himself. Although his current strength was far from Bing Wuqing's, he was not willing to always be below her. However, if the bespectacled doctor continued to develop like this, he would never be able to surpass Bing Wuqing in this lifetime. Leader, there's something you don't know. Although Bing Wuqing is stronger than me in the archaic underworld, strength alone won't be enough to make a name for herself. It also depends on her background and connections. Not many disciples in the Archaic Alliance will respect her because there are no benefits. Usually they will just stay away from her, but I'm different. Shui Jianfeng smiled proudly. How so? The bespectacled doctor asked in surprise. The reason is simple. It's because my father is the vice-sect leader of the Snow Sword faction. Once he gets promoted, he will be the leader of the Snow Sword faction. You should know that the Snow Sword faction is one of the 10 small sects and clans of the Archaic Alliance. Their influence is not to be underestimated. Naturally they will respect her, Shui Jianfeng boasted. That's true. The bespectacled doctor nodded. He was naturally aware of Shui Jianfeng's background. Previously he did not pay much attention to him, but now that he heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up. In that case, Shui Jianfeng's value was not inferior to Bing Wuqing's at all. Strictly speaking, he was far more valuable than Bing Wuqing. Although he could not see the bespectacled doctor's expression, Shui Jianfeng could sense the change in his attitude. He was overjoyed, thinking that his trip today was not in vain. He quickly expressed his stance and said, Leader, that father of mine has always listened to me. In the future, if our center really develops into the archaic underworld, I can help to rope them in. It will also be a contribution to our center. Chapter 5161. Yes, thank you for the compliment. But I'm not strong enough now. If I could be promoted to a higher level, my words would carry more weight. By then, it wouldn't be a problem to rope in the entire Snow Sword faction, let alone my father. Shui Jianfeng said deliberately. You want to improve yourself? If the bespectacled doctor still didn't understand what he meant, he must be out of his mind. But from the perspective of a superior, he didn't mind Shui Jianfeng having such thoughts. Besides, this guy was indeed worth training. Of course, if the superior trains me well, I'll do anything for you, Shui Jianfeng said hurriedly. That's good. The headquarters has an important training program. As long as you perform well, I can recommend you to the superiors. I guarantee that your strength will improve by leaps and bounds. The bespectacled doctor promised immediately. Really? Thank you so much, superior. Shui Jianfeng was overjoyed. After thanking him profusely, Shui Jianfeng left while turning his head back every 3 steps. The bespectacled doctor chuckled meaningfully. Ambition, background, and ability. Needless to say, he's quite the material. Why do I feel that this guy isn't very reliable? Brother Dafeng came up and said. He had heard the conversation from the beginning to the end. He had seen Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng's performance. You're thinking too much. With the threat of poisonous gas, he won't dare to betray us. Besides, it's a good thing that he's ambitious because that's why he needs the strength of our center. The bespectacled doctor glanced at him and thought to himself, You're a traitor. How dare you say that? You're really good at pretending. Brother Dafeng frowned and didn't say anything else. He was still anxious about how to contact Lin Yi. He knew that Lin Yi was definitely on the transit islands, but he couldn't go out alone. He didn't even have a chance to send a message. By the way, these people all went to the Green Cloud faction on the North Island. We have to be careful, the bespectacled doctor muttered. How? Brother Dafeng asked. You don't have to worry about that. I have my ways. The bespectacled doctor snorted. The first person he had to be careful of was Brother Dafeng. He could let Brother Dafeng know everything on the surface, but he couldn't say anything else. A few days later, Bing Wuqing was summoned for a physical examination as usual. She didn't find anything wrong with her, but at the last moment she suddenly felt something. Others might not feel it, but he had an extraordinary perception. Otherwise he wouldn't have been able to master ruthless ice force. He clearly felt that something was implanted into him. It was very subtle, but there was no doubt. He didn't know what it was, but he immediately realized that it must be a high-tech device used by the center to secretly monitor him. Otherwise they wouldn't have to be so secretive. Bing Wuqing didn't dare to let her guard down. As the leading master uncle of the Snow Sword faction, she had to participate in the mining like the other disciples. Moreover, Lin Yi had told her before that if anything happened in the future, she could use the mining as an opportunity to communicate with him. As expected, he saw Lin Yi while he was mining, but the two didn't get too close. They waited until they reached a secluded area, and Lin Yi didn't use the opportunity to catch his breath to talk. Instead they made a few hand gestures. Him? That's troublesome. Lin Yi frowned inwardly. If Bing Wuqing had something like that on her, then it wasn't hard to imagine that the others would have something similar on them as well. If that was the case, it wouldn't be realistic to continue attacking Jing Taiyang and the others. The people in the center were really alert. Lin Yi didn't dare to be negligent. This wasn't a small problem. If it had been someone else, Qin Yuan and the others might not have been able to detect it. They might even have given themselves away. Lin Yi didn't dare to be negligent. It was a sudden crisis, but it wasn't enough to make Lin Yi panic. After all, it was just a small situation for him. It couldn't be compared to the ups and downs he had experienced on the Heaven Stage Island. Don't be nervous. Since the center is so cautious, we'll give them some face. Don't act rashly for now. Lin Yi didn't say anything, but his voice suddenly sounded in Bing Wuqing's mind. Bing Wuqing was stunned. She immediately understood that Lin Yi had used the technique of transmitting vital energy to his voice. Ordinary people might not be able to do that, but he was a golden core expert who had seen a lot in the immemorial pugilistic world. He knew this technique, but he didn't use it often. Won't they know you're transmitting vital energy to your voice? Bing Wuqing replied in the same way. She knew how to transmit vital energy to her voice, but she knew nothing about the technology of the secular world. She didn't know if transmitting vital energy to her voice could hide from these technology. Of course not. You don't understand the principle of the monitoring device. It can detect sound waves, but it can't detect vital energy waves. No matter how powerful the center is, it can't do that. This is because technology and cultivation are two things that have nothing to do with each other. To truly integrate technology and cultivation is not something that can be done in a few years or decades. It might be possible in the distant future, but it's impossible now. As Lin Yi passed on this message, he couldn't help but think of Han Jingjing. When it came to integrating technology and cultivation, this girl was definitely ahead of everyone else. After all, it was probably impossible to find a second automatic alchemy artifact in the whole world. Lin Yi's explanation was simple and clear, but Bing Wuqing didn't understand. She didn't understand the technology of the secular world, so she naturally didn't understand it. Alright, I understand. So what's next is to wait and see. Bing Wuqing asked. That's right. Let's wait and see first. If anything happens, I'll let you know. Lin Yi nodded. Apart from Bing Wuqing, he also wanted to find an opportunity to transmit vital energy to Qin Yuan, Qinlong, Jing Yueming, and the others through transmitting vital energy to them. He was contacting these people on his own. After all, it was better to be safe than sorry. After returning from the Spirit Jade mine at the bottom of the sea, the first thing Lin Yi did was to look for Lin Dongfang. He smiled bitterly and said, I've just received news that the center has started to install listening devices on Bing Wuqing and the others. It seems that they've been alerted by the fact that they've come to our island. You don't have to work anymore. Jing Taiyang and the others won't be able to make a move on us for now. Ah, that's to be expected. It's very normal. Lin Dongfang laughed. Chapter 5162. Of course it's normal. I've long guessed that the center wouldn't be easy to deal with. Back then, even your master didn't have much of an effect after fighting with the center for so long. Your little tricks are just child's play at best. Lin Dongfang smiled. Child's play? The corner of Lin Yi's mouth twitched. Whether it was from his or Lin Dongfang's point of view, instigating Bing Wuqing and the others to defect wasn't considered a big move. In the end, it was just a small squabble, but it was still different from children playing house. Why? You think I'm not? Lin Dongfang smiled and pouted. Compared to what Yang Ming had done in the past, it was not an exaggeration to say that Lin Yi's actions were child's play. Lin Yi was instantly amused. He couldn't help but ask curiously, since there's nothing to do now, why don't you tell me about my master in the center? You always kept me guessing when I asked you about these things in the past. But now that I have some strength and ability, I can't possibly continue to hide it now, right? Ever since he was young, he had asked this question countless times. Unfortunately, Lin Dongfang had never told him, always saying that he was not strong enough. Even if he told him, it would be useless. Now that he had mentioned it, he naturally had to ask out of habit. However, he did not have much hope in his heart. Unexpectedly, after a moment of silence, Lin Dongfang actually said, "Fine. Since it's come to this, it's good to tell you. At least you'll know what to do in the future." Really? Lin Yi was shocked himself. He was nervous and excited as he hurriedly urged, "Hurry up! Hurry up!" He couldn't be blamed for losing his composure. He knew very little about these things and had always been curious. It was almost a sore point. Now that Lin Dongfang suddenly told him, it would be strange if he wasn't excited. "Alright, but where should I start?" Lin Dongfang rubbed his eyebrows. "From the beginning, of course. Don't keep me in suspense." "Hurry up," Lin Yi said impatiently. "From the beginning? How long would that take?" Lin Dongfang rolled his eyes at him and said, "Then let's start from the center. Do you know who the founder of the center is?" Oh. Lin Yi hurriedly asked. Ever since his soul projection returned to the secular world, he had always wanted to investigate the center. Aside from the teleportation method between the secular world and Heaven Stage Island, this was the most important thing he wanted to know. Only by knowing the founder of the center could he truly understand its ins and outs. Li Boyang. This person has advanced technology. The center was founded by him. Lin Dongfang said. Advanced technology? No wonder the technological prowess of the center is so strong, it's all because of this. Lin Yi heard this and immediately asked, "Then why did he fight with my master?" He didn't fight with your master Yang Ming at first. His biggest enemy was actually your grandfather." Lin Dongfang laughed. "What? My grandfather? Do you know my grandfather?" Lin Yi suddenly froze. He always thought that he was an orphan, an abandoned baby picked up by Lin Dongfang from the outside. Apart from Lin Dongfang, the only real elder was Master Yang Ming. But listening to Lin Dongfang's words, he actually knew my grandfather. "Of course your family has a deep grudge with the center. If your grandfather didn't steal the goddess that he yearned for, why would Li Boyang fight with your family?" Lin Dongfang said with a smile. It can actually involve my grandfather's generation?" Lin Yi was baffled. He thought that the grudge was at most between Li Boyang and his master. He didn't expect it to trace back so far. Even his grandfather was involved and he even stole the goddess of others? If you really want to talk about it, the 3 generations of your family are deeply entangled with the center. Your grandfather fought with them, your parents fought with them, and when it comes to your generation you still have to continue fighting with them. Of course your master Yang Ming is also fighting with them. This entanglement is not just deep, it is simply unfathomable. Lin Dongfang laughed. "Old man, do you know my parents? Can you tell me about them?" Lin Yi immediately asked impatiently. Although he had no concept of parents since he was a child, and he didn't have any intuitive impression of them, the word parents had always been the most yearning and the most unreachable word for him. He always thought that he was an orphan with an unknown origin, so he didn't think too much about it. Now that he suddenly heard Lin Dongfang say this, he suddenly became excited. Even with his psychological quality, he couldn't control it. People's hearts were made of flesh. It was an innate instinct for everyone to trace back to their roots. It had nothing to do with strength. "Your parents?" "Well, since we've already talked about it, there's no harm in revealing a few things to you. Your father is Lu Yezi. He used to be a member of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. He's your master's best friend." Lin Dongfang said briefly. "Lu Yezi? My father is Lu Yezi?" Lin Yi quickly remembered the name. At the same time he was shocked. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't imagine that his father was actually a member of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau and was a best friend of his master. Then he quickly asked, "Then, what about my mother? By the way, since my father's surname is Lu, why is my surname Lin?" "It's very simple. It's because you followed your mother's surname. Her name is Lin Yi." Lin Dongfang smiled and then added, "Let me say one more thing. She is my adopted daughter." "Adopted daughter?" Lin Yi choked again when he heard the words. He looked at Lin Dongfang up and down again, dumbfounded. He stuttered, "So, aren't you my grandfather? What else do you think? Lin Dongfang said with a smile. Lin Yi choked for a long time and couldn't say a word. Everything from childhood to adulthood was vivid in his mind. He didn't feel anything before, but now that he thought about it, the feeling was completely different. He was speechless for a long time before he smiled bitterly. You've been hiding it from me for a long time. For so many years, he had never known what the relationship between him and Lin Dongfang was. They were not master and apprentice, nor were they grandfather and grandson. Every time he asked, there was no result. He could only muddle through without understanding. Who would have thought that the old man was actually his grandfather? Chapter 5163. Ugh, this is also true. Lin Yi had to smile. Although he wasn't like Shengguan Laner, Ning Xuefei, and the other young ladies who hated cultivation, he was still very playful when he was a child. Every day he would think about going up the mountain to get bird eggs or go down the river to catch fish. If it weren't for Lin Dongfang who had been forcing him behind his back, he probably wouldn't be able to achieve anything even if he became Yang Ming's disciple, let alone reaching the level he had today. Fortunately, you kid didn't embarrass me. You're not useless. Lin Dongfang said with a tone of relief and fear. Hey, you're my grandfather. You don't have to look down on me like this. Lin Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, oh yeah, you just said that my family is fighting with the center. What about you, old man? Are you also a sworn enemy of the center? Me. My sworn brother, who is your master, is fighting to the death with the center. My daughter and son-in-law are also fighting to the death with the center. Anyone who has even the slightest relationship with me is fighting to the death with the center. What do you think my relationship with the center is? Lin Dongfang curled his lips. So, you're being dragged onto the pirate ship? Lin Yi teased. That's not it. I'm already on the ship. How can I be dragged onto it? Lin Dongfang laughed. That's right. Old man, you should tell me more about my parents. I've been waiting. Lin Yi couldn't wait to urge again. If you really want to know about these things, then wait until you see them in the future and ask them yourself. Why are you asking me? Lin Dongfang took the opportunity to keep him in suspense. Lin Yi was speechless for a while, but then he reacted and said with surprise and joy, I can still see them? They're not dead? How can you say that? My daughter and son-in-law are all fine. Is there a son like you? You haven't even met them and you're already cursing them? Lin Dongfang couldn't help but roll his eyes at him. No, I was just too excited, that's why I spoke without thinking. Lin Yi shook his head repeatedly. In his imagination, since his parents had entrusted him to Lin Dongfang, it was most likely that something bad had happened to them. Otherwise, which parents in the world would casually entrust their child to someone else, even if that person was a grandfather? Now that he knew that his parents were still alive, Lin Yi's mood couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised and complicated. Noticing Lin Yi's complicated expression, Lin Dongfang explained, Don't think too much about it. There must be a reason why they placed you here. After all, only my place can be considered a rare pure land that stands aloof from worldly affairs. Yes. Lin Yi nodded. He had always been an open-minded person. If it was someone else, they might be stuck in a dead end, but he would not think too much about it. Just as Lin Dongfang had said, since his parents had made such arrangements, they naturally had their own reasons. He would naturally know when they met again in the future. Okay, what else do you want to ask? Hurry up and ask now. I'll say this first, I won't wait for you if you're late. Lin Dongfang urged. He had already smelled the smell of Aunt Qing cooking in the distance. Compared to nagging with Lin Yi about these things, it was obviously more important for him to eat. Well, I'll ask an off-topic question. I have asked these questions before, but you never said it. Why did you suddenly ask me so much today? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask curiously. The sun rose from the west. Lin Dongfang said casually without sincerity. Lin Yi was speechless and smiled bitterly. I asked so seriously. Even if you want to deal with it, can you at least be more sincere? It's too disrespectful. Alright, since you've asked so sincerely, I'll be merciful and answer you with sincerity. I didn't tell you this before because your level wasn't high enough, so no matter how much I said, it would be useless. But now, although it's still useless, at least I can give you a direction to work towards. You don't have to be complacent and make no progress. Is that okay? Lin Dongfang glanced at him and said. Still not sincere, but it's more like a human. Lin Yi chuckled. Actually, even if you didn't say that, I wouldn't have stayed where I was. My training isn't just for myself, it's for the people around me. I can't stop for them. This was the truth. Based on what he did on the Heaven Stage Island, returning to the secular world to save a group of beauties was his biggest motivation. It was also because of this that he did not dare to slack off. In just 3 years, he soared from the early stage of foundation establishment all the way to the early stage of profound ascension. This kind of miracle was difficult for outsiders to understand. Even he himself felt that it was incredible when he thought about it. Not bad, at least a little responsible. Lin Dongfang rarely praised. By the way, there's one more thing I've always wanted to ask. Lin Yi suddenly took out the jade pendant he wore and asked, "You should know what's going on with my jade pendant, right?" Although he had obtained the jade pendant in a fortuitous encounter in the cave, when he gradually discovered the magic of the jade pendant, he knew that the origin of the jade pendant was definitely not simple. Moreover, from Lin Dongfang's behavior, it could be seen that the old man definitely knew about it. Moreover, it was very likely that this magical jade pendant was related to the old man. Lin Dongfang was silent for a moment as if recalling the past. Then he slowly said, "Back then your master, your father, and I traveled together in the Miaojiang Valley. There, we met a very powerful science and technology doctor. His name was Sun Sikong." Wait, Sun Sikong? Lin Yi's mind flashed and he immediately jumped in shock. Isn't Sun Sikong Jing's master? He's actually your friend? Not only that, but he's also a mad scientist under your grandfather. Back then he came to Earth to protect your father. To a certain extent, it was his magical glasses that created your master. It was your master's starting point from the ordinary to the extraordinary. Lin Dongfang couldn't help but feel a little emotional when he said this. Thinking back, his days were full of legends like Lin Yi's. The name of the twin evils Vajra was so terrifying that people would tremble in fear. Now he was holed up in the West Star Mountain village in retirement. Thinking about it made one sigh. Then what does he have to do with the jade pendant? Lin Yi was confused. The relationship is very simple. This jade pendant was made by him. Lin Dongfang's words were shocking. Chapter 5164. What else do you think? Not only this jade pendant, but the caves and valleys that you encountered in the past were all arranged by us in advance to fool you. Do you really think that a pie fell from the sky and you can have a fortuitous encounter just by taking a few steps? How can there be so many fortuitous encounters in the world? Do you think you are making up a novel? Lin Dongfang curled his lips. Ugh, are you kidding me? Lin Yi blushed with shame. But when he thought about it, he was still young and playful. If there were no fortuitous encounters, he would not have been so curious and diligent in his cultivation. This group of people really put in a lot of effort. Now you know what it means to be a parent in the world. For the sake of letting you cultivate properly, all of us have to go through all this trouble. We're all playing with you, said Lin Dongfang with a smile. Wait a minute. Since this jade pendant was made by Sun Sikong, what about Jiao Lao? What's the matter with Jiao Lao? A living person can't be made by him, right? Lin Yi asked quickly. That's not it. That's not it. Jiao Yazi is a real person. I think he's your grandfather's martial nephew or something. Anyway, it's a mess. I don't know the specifics. You should ask them yourself in the future. In short, your entire family and your master are in big trouble. Lin Dongfang said in a low voice. Is it because of this center? Lin Yi asked quickly. Yes, it's the center. Li Buoyang was your grandfather's classmate. This person is not to be underestimated. Sun Sikong's technology level is good enough, right? In comparison, he is not bad at all. Otherwise, it is impossible for the center to have such advanced technology. This person is a great enemy. Lin Dongfang said with a rare serious expression. Although he already knew that the grudge between his family and the center could be traced back to his grandfather's generation, Lin Yi was still a little confused when he heard these words. He really did not expect that his family and the center would be a feud of 3 generations. In fact, until now he was still a little puzzled. There was clearly no irreconcilable hatred between him and the center, but for some reason, they always unconsciously walked to the opposite side and always had all kinds of conflicts. He even felt that the center was troublesome because of this, but now, it seemed that this was originally a predetermined fate. In this way, from now on, Lin Yi would no longer have to play tricks on the center. Even if he wanted to kill the center, Lin Yi wouldn't feel any guilt. After all, this was what he was supposed to do. Now that you mention it, I'm under a lot of pressure. Although Lin Yi smiled bitterly, the expression on his face was very resolute. In the past, it didn't matter if he didn't know about this, but now it was different. The burden on his shoulders was even heavier. Now that he had identified this powerful enemy at the center, no matter who it was, they would feel a lot of pressure. Even though he had always been fearless, he couldn't help but feel a little heavy. What pressure do you have? Lin Dongfang curled his lips disapprovingly and said with a smile, although the center is not to be trifled with so far, they at most only pay attention to you. For the time being, they won't gather their strength to deal with a little brat like you. If you want to talk about pressure, it's on your master and your parents. They are facing the true strength of the center. Then, where are my master and my parents now? Lin Yi hurriedly asked. It was definitely impossible for them to be on Earth. Otherwise, with modern communication methods, it would be impossible for him not to receive any news. According to his speculation, they were either in another plane like Heavenly Island or in outer space. Although it sounded too unrealistic with the current technological means of the secular world, don't forget that whether it was the center or Sun Sikong, they were both far above the secular world in terms of technology. This was not completely impossible. I'm not too sure about the specifics because I haven't been there before. Roughly speaking, it should be in another plane. Lin Dongfang's answer was just as Lin Yi expected. The same as Heavenly Island? Lin Yi's eyes lit up. There are still some differences. As far as I know, that is the transfer point of the four-dimensional space. Because of some reason they are now in a deadlock with the center there. As for the exact situation, I don't know. Lin Dongfang sighed and said, "Can I go?" Lin Yi suddenly felt a surge of emotions. He had never seen his parents, but he had absolute confidence in his master, Yang Ming, so he wasn't too worried about Yang Ming and his parents' situation. However, it would be a lie to say that he wasn't worried at all. Moreover, he really wanted to see his parents as soon as possible. This was human nature. What are you going to do with your little strength? Run to be cannon fodder and a burden? Lin Dongfang glared at him. Lin Yi thought that with the strength of his current Yuan Shen, a mere foundation establishment great perfection couldn't even make a living in the Archaic Alliance, let alone run to support Master Yang Ming. He could only say, what if it's my real body? Can I do it with the strength of the early stage of mysterious ascension? Let's not talk about whether your strength is enough or not. Even if it is, I don't know how to get there. What's the use of asking me? Lin Dongfang shook his head and said earnestly, the most important thing for you now is to practice hard. When you are strong enough, no matter what you do, you will be able to get twice the result with half the effort. As for the four-dimensional space, wait until you have the strength to run amok on Heavenly Island. It's still too early to talk about it now. This? Lin Yi hesitated for a moment, then nodded heavily, well, I know what to do. As Lin Dongfang said, his current strength was still obviously insufficient. Although his main body could possess the strength comparable to a magnate realm master at the early stage of the mysterious ascension realm, this strength was far from first class even in the heavenly stage island. He was still far from those real top masters, not to mention the mysterious and unfathomable center. One day when he really had the strength to run amok on Heaven Stage Island, then he could really help Master Yang Ming and his parents. Although he was anxious at the moment, he could only turn his impatience into motivation to work hard and strive to reach the next level as soon as possible. Okay, that's enough for today. You can slowly ask them later. Come, let's go eat. After Lin Dongfang said, he was busy snatching food. Chapter 5165. Shaking his head with a wry smile, Lin Yi had no choice but to follow him. However, the old man had said enough today. At least he was no longer as clueless about his own affairs as before. He finally had a plan. He had a clear goal and direction for the future, but for now Lin Yi had to stop his original plan. The center was so cautious that he could not continue to incite defection. He could only wait and see. However, what Lin Yi did not expect was that at the same time he stopped his instigating plan, the center's instigating plan also entered a stage of stagnation. He had not been able to recruit new disciples of the Archaic Alliance for a long time. On the one hand, it was mainly because there were only a few disciples of the Archaic Alliance who were really familiar with them. Even Xue Jianfeng, who seemed to have a wide network of people, had only managed to recruit Qin Yuan after such a long time. Even so, he was secretly instigated by Lin Yi. Needless to say, the others were even worse. No one dared to talk about this kind of thing unless they were really familiar with each other. Otherwise, if word got out, it would be the end of them. Besides, Bing Wuqing and the others had been secretly subdued by Lin Yi, so it was only natural that they did not put in any effort. On the other hand, even the doctor himself had doubts. Although there were no signs of secret betrayal by Bing Wuqing and the others after installing a listening device, the fact that Bing Wuqing and the others had gone to the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island had sounded an alarm in his heart. Secretly instigating defection must be done like boiling a frog in warm water. He could not take too big a step, otherwise, it would be easy to pull the wool over his eyes. However, it was not a solution to keep this stalemate. It was right to be cautious, but if there was no progress at all, he would not be able to explain it to Lan Xiaoru when she asked. The archaic plan was a step forward that he had been planning for a long time. He could not give up halfway. Just when the doctor was at his wits' end, the envoy from the headquarters of the center of the secular world came unexpectedly, which shocked the doctor. In the past he had always taken the initiative to report to Lan Xiaoru regularly, and this had never happened before. The central headquarters actually sent a special envoy. Could it be that Lan Xiaoru had sent him to punish him? Special envoy, what is your purpose for coming here this time? The doctor asked cautiously. The special envoy did not answer directly, but looked at Brother Dafeng next to him with some wariness. The meaning was clear. Oh, by the way, Dafeng, go and patrol the surroundings to see if there are any abnormalities. The bespectacled doctor immediately sent Brother Dafeng away. Yes. Although Big Brother Feng wanted to stay and listen to what was going on, there were too many loopholes. He could only nod in agreement, thinking that if there were any secret operations, even if he didn't directly participate in them in the future, he would definitely be able to find some clues. After Big Brother Dafeng left, the envoy took out 2 letters and handed them to the bespectacled doctor. This is a secret letter from Dr. Lan to you. It's a commendation and affirmation of your achievements. He hopes that you can continue to push the primordial project to the next level and pave the way for the future. All right. Thank you for your compliment, Dr. Lan. Thank you for the trouble. The bespectacled doctor breathed a sigh of relief, but when he took the letter, he was stunned. Why are there 2 letters? In addition to the secret letter Dr. Lan gave you, there is also a letter from Heavenly Island. Dr. Lan specifically asked you to deliver it to Lin Yi under the Central Express delivery, said the envoy. A letter to be delivered to Lin Yi? Didn't the Central Express delivery suspend this service a long time ago? Why did it start again? The bespectacled doctor was surprised. He took the letter and looked at the envelope carefully. He was about to tear it open to see what was inside. However, the envoy stopped him and said sternly, "Before coming, Dr. Lan specifically told me that anything related to Lin Yi is a top secret. Anything related to Lin Yi is a top secret, including herself. No one in the Common World headquarters can look into it. This is what the higher-ups want." This. The bespectacled doctor choked. He remembered that Lan Xiaoru had specifically told him not to provoke Lin Yi. He couldn't help but be more curious. What was the background of this Lin Yi? Why did the higher-ups pay so much attention to him? At this moment he felt like 100 claws were scratching his heart. The more the higher-ups were like this, the more curious he became. However, he also knew that curiosity killed people. In the end, he didn't dare to peek at Lin Yi's letter. It would be bad if he accidentally saw some shocking secret. After all, the more he knew, the faster he would die. But how should I deliver this letter to Lin Yi? Can't we just send someone to deliver it directly? Wouldn't that expose ourselves in public? The bespectacled doctor couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. Dr. Lan said that this is your problem. If you can't even handle such a small matter, then what's the point of talking about the primordial plan? The envoy relayed. The corners of the bespectacled doctor's mouth twitched. If this guy wasn't Lan Xiaoru's envoy, he would have slapped him 14,000 times just for this tone. In the end, he endured it and said in a deep voice, "Okay, I'll arrange it." After thinking about it, it was impossible for him to send this letter directly to Lin Yi. That would be equivalent to exposing himself in front of the Primordial Alliance. In the future he could forget about the primordial plan. However, since Lan Xiaoru had given the order, he had to deliver this letter. The bespectacled doctor glanced at Big Brother Feng in the distance, and an idea came to his mind. It was not impossible to secretly leak the contents of the letter to Lin Yi through this traitor. However, after thinking about it carefully, he rejected the idea. After all, this was a letter. When the time came, he still needed Lin Yi's letter. It was not like Lin Yi could secretly send the letter through Big Brother Feng again. That would be too ridiculous. No, the central courier can't appear in this transit archipelago no matter what. This letter can only be delivered in the secular world at most. It's only reasonable for their own people to deliver it. The bespectacled doctor muttered to himself for a long time. Suddenly he slapped his head. Right, the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. Although there was no one left in Lin Yi's mansion, the Supernatural Investigation Bureau couldn't follow him in. This was an important support for him to influence and control all the cultivation forces in the secular world. As long as the letter was delivered to the Supernatural Investigation Bureau, it would naturally be delivered to Lin Yi's hands. In fact, it was just as the bespectacled doctor expected. In order to ensure the stability of the forces in the secular world, Lin Yi would come out every once in a while to notify Feng Tianlong of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. This letter was quickly delivered to him. Lin Yi was quite surprised to receive a letter like this from Sky Class Island. Since when did the center start doing this kind of express service between Sky Class Island and the common world? Chapter 5166. It was not until he finished reading Tian Chan's handwritten letter that Lin Yi realized that the center was giving face to Okuda. She was indeed a big shot from a super family. Even the center had to treat her carefully. In comparison, Lin Yi was still far behind. In addition to expressing her concern, Tian Chan also mentioned some of the current situation of Tiandan Pavilion. Although Lin Yi frowned secretly, he could do nothing about the current situation. After all, even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. Without enough high-grade elixirs, the business would gradually be snatched away by Zheng Dongxing, a 7th-grade alchemist. From the very beginning, Lin Yi had only prepared 3 months for his primordial spirit projection. According to what Southern Sky Aurora had said, 3 months was basically the limit of primordial spirit projection. Hence, the high-grade elixirs he had prepared in advance could only last him for 3 months. However, he hadn't expected that because of the starring charcoal, he would actually be able to last until now unscathed. It was within his expectations that the Heavenly Pill Pavilion would fall into a predicament. However, Tiandan Pavilion could only rely on Tian Chan and the others to continue holding on. Although Lin Yi seemed to have nothing to do in the secular world, after all, the Archaic Alliance had emerged. Moreover, the Archaic Trial was coming soon. As long as there was a chance, Lin Yi would have to explore it in person. In comparison, the predicament of Tiandan Pavilion was only a small matter. Fortunately, the Heavenly Dan Pavilion was only in a difficult situation. With the good reputation it had built in the past few years, at most, its business would shrink a little, but it would not face the desperate situation of closing down. Moreover, with the help of a big shot like Okuda, the medicine sect would at most do some shameful tricks in the dark. It would not be a serious blow. The Heavenly Dan Pavilion was still as stable as Mount Tai. As usual, this was a letter of acknowledgement. After reading it, Lin Yi immediately replied to Tian Chan and the others. In addition to introducing the situation on his side to reassure Tian Chan and the others, he also mentioned another thing in the letter, asking them to collect the cultivation methods of various sects on Heaven Stage Island. It wasn't just a whim. In fact, Lin Yi had been thinking about it for a long time. When he used the art of tranquility to subdue Xanigia, he was already thinking that he should have collected more of the sect's arts if he knew about it. It did not need to be so profound and exquisite, as long as it was the entry-level cultivation method of various sects on Heaven Stage Island. Then he would not only be the granduncle of the Blue Cloud sect on the North Island, he believed that no matter which archaic sect he went to, he would be worshipped as a granduncle. Especially if he wanted to further contact with the Archaic Alliance in the future, these cultivation methods of sects would be the best stepping stone. Of course, with the ability of Tian Chan and the others, it was not easy to collect the cultivation methods of various sects on Heaven Stage Island on a large scale. After all, these were the secrets of various sections. Even the most basic entry-level cultivation method would never be made public. There were only 2 ways to get it, either by bribing the internal disciples of these sects, or directly from the black market at a high price. Sitting on the Tiandan Pavilion, a money-making machine, Tian Chan and the others did not lack spiritual jade. As long as the cultivation methods of various sects were available on the black market, it should not be difficult to get them. The difficult part was the tight-lipped sects on Heaven Stage Island. If they did not even have it on the black market, then it would be a little troublesome. However, Lin Yi still said so in the letter. He believed that Tian Chan and the others would definitely help him with these things. Even if he could not buy it on the black market, he could always think of other ways. Of course, he only said that the more cultivation methods of various sects, the better. He did not say that he had to get all of them. It did not matter if he could not get them. The reply was sent quickly, because before the other party sent it, they had already said that they would come to the Supernatural Investigation Bureau to pick it up in 3 days. As for how they knew the address of the bureau, there was no need to ask anymore. After all, the bureau did not have a high degree of confidentiality. Basically, all the cultivation forces knew the location of the headquarters, so it was not difficult for the center to find out. After that, Lin Yi returned to his peaceful life. Other than practicing some practical spiritual techniques, the rest of his time was to pay attention to the situation of Lingshan and the others. After these few months of dedicated training, with the rich spiritual qi in the surroundings and the supreme grade foundation establishment elixir provided by Lin Yi, although the difficulty of breaking through was much higher than that of ordinary people, they had already reached the threshold of breaking through. They were only 1 step away from foundation building. However, this final step was as difficult as ascending to the heavens for most people, and many people were unable to take this final step even if they spent their entire lives. This required not only natural talent and aptitude, but even more importantly, perseverance and determination. If they couldn't cut off all means of retreat, then foundation establishment was bound to be an extravagant hope that was far beyond their reach. Lin Yi knew all of this, but there was nothing he could do. He could only wait for the moment when everyone came to their senses. On the other side, the professor was getting more and more curious about Lin Yi, especially after he sent the letter away. He was constantly trying to guess who this Lin Yi really was. Unfortunately, Xiaoru had given him strict orders, and he didn't dare open Lin Yi's letter without permission, nor did he dare test Lin Yi. After all, if he made a mistake, it wouldn't just be his future, he might even lose his life. But even so, he could tell from the cautious attitude of his superiors that Lin Yi's true identity was a very powerful existence. If he could figure out a way to get to the bottom of this, he might be able to do something great. Of course, this had to be done without anyone noticing, otherwise he'd be in big trouble if word got out. Just as the professor was hesitating, Shui Jianfeng came uninvited and asked with a fawning smile, "Sir, about the focus training program you mentioned to me last time, I wonder if it has been approved?" Hehe, you're really impatient. Hehe, you sure are impatient. The key training program means a lot of resources, and the quota is extremely rare. There aren't many people in the entire center who can get such treatment. They need to weigh all aspects and determine that you have the value of key training. You've only been there for a few days, how can you be approved so easily? The bespectacled doctor shook his head and sneered. Yes, this subordinate is eager to make contributions and wants to quickly improve my strength so that I can rope in the Archaic Alliance for our center. Shui Jianfeng said shamelessly. Chapter 5167. Thank you for the promotion. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly expressed his loyalty. Soon after, he smiled awkwardly and said, "This subordinate has been looking for a suitable target to instigate defection recently, but because I don't have a reliable relationship, I don't dare to speak rashly for the sake of safety. However, the higher-ups can rest assured that this subordinate has always done his utmost for the center's matters. I believe there will be new developments soon." In order to surpass Bing Wuqing, he was trying his best to make a contribution. If he wasn't afraid of getting into trouble, he might have developed a bunch of subordinates. There's no rush. For the sake of safety, don't be greedy. The bespectacled professor warned solemnly. After thinking for a while, he suddenly said, "By the way, how much do you know about Lin Yi?" Lin Yi? Shui Jianfeng was stunned. He scratched his head and said, "I don't know much about this. I only know that he's the president of the Cultivators Association in the secular world, and also the Grandmaster of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. That's all." If that's the case. The bespectacled doctor fell into deep thought. What Shui Jianfeng had said was just the surface information which could be easily found out. Just these two identities alone could be used to intimidate ordinary cultivators, but it would be pure nonsense to say that the entire center would be afraid of them. Is it possible that the higher-ups want to do something to Lin Yi? Shui Jianfeng observed his expression and was delighted at the same time. He hated Lin Yi to the core. If it wasn't for the higher-ups stopping him, he would have done it long ago. No, don't think too much. I'm just curious about Lin Yi's identity and background. The higher-ups have repeatedly ordered us not to provoke Lin Yi. Don't stir up trouble for me. The bespectacled professor shook his head repeatedly. Then, I'll think of a way to find out. Shui Jianfeng was eager to show off, so he volunteered immediately. You? What can you think of? The bespectacled professor couldn't help but be suspicious. Lin Yi was from the secular world. What could he, Shui Jianfeng, who came from the Archaic Alliance, find out? People always come up with ideas. As long as we try a few more times, we'll get something. Don't you think so? Shui Jianfeng smiled. But we can't mess with Lin Yi. The bespectacled doctor was still worried. Yes, we won't provoke Lin Yi, but there's no rule that says we can't touch anyone around him, right? Shui Jianfeng suggested, rolling his eyes. He didn't know about Lin Yi, but Ling Shan and the others around him should know something about him. As long as he could think of a way to pry open their mouths, he wouldn't have to worry about not getting anything. You want to start with the people around him? Hearing that, the bespectacled doctor became interested, but then he shook his head and said, "It's not realistic. Those people are now practicing in the territory of Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Lin Yi and Lin Dongfang are always together and Xianijia is helping them. It's not easy to find a breakthrough from them. What's more, if you want to do something to them, you can't avoid Lin Yi. In the end, you still have to confront him. It's useless." That might not be the case. Shui Jianfeng pinched his chin and sneered. What do you mean? The bespectacled doctor frowned as he looked at him, not knowing what he was planning. It's hard to find a chance under normal circumstances, but it's the competition soon. If we do it right, we might have a chance. Shui Jianfeng said, pretending to be profound. Competition? The bespectacled doctor paused. That's right. This is a tradition of the Archaic Alliance. Every time before the primordial trials, there will be a grand competition. Only those with sufficient strength will be able to participate in the primordial trials. Otherwise they'll just be throwing their lives away. Although this time's primordial trials is rather special, as long as there are no accidents, this tradition will definitely not be lost, explained Shui Jianfeng. So what? Even if it's a competition, it's your Archaic Alliance's business. What does it have to do with Lin Yi and the others? The bespectacled doctor still didn't understand. That's not difficult. Since they're already staying on the transit islands, it's not difficult to force them to participate in the competition. Shui Jianfeng smiled confidently. Just like how he forced Lin Yi and the others to participate in the seabed mining last time, they just had to repeat the same trick for this competition. Moreover, any disciple who wanted to participate in the archaic trials had to pass the test of the competition first. If Lin Yi and the others had fantasies about participating in the archaic trials, it was even more impossible for them to avoid it. But even if they participate in the competition, what does it have to do with what we just said? The bespectacled doctor asked curiously. Of course it does. Think about it, the biggest problem we have now is that Lin Yi and the people around him are all holed up in the Azure Cloud Sect's territory. As long as we make a move during the competition and kill one or two of them, Lin Yi will definitely get angry with me. At that time, no matter if I lure him out or if he does something else, we'll always be able to find an opportunity. What do you think? Shui Jianfeng said proudly. The bespectacled doctor pondered for a moment and finally nodded. That's a good idea. As long as we can provoke him, we'll naturally be able to find a flaw. It'll be much easier for us to deal with the aftermath later. That's right, and this won't go against the orders from the higher-ups. 1. We didn't do anything to Lin Yi, and 2. This is the Archaic Alliance's competition. Even if we accidentally kill someone, it'll be reasonable. No one can blame anyone. Shui Jianfeng grinned. Alright, we'll do that. I'll leave this to you then. When you're done, I think your priority training spot will be approved as well. Don't disappoint me. The bespectacled doctor agreed. Yes, I'll wait and see then. Shui Jianfeng was overjoyed. He couldn't deal with Lin Yi directly right now, but dealing with Lingshan and the people around Lin Yi would be a way for him to vent his anger. He could also use this to get into the doctor's good graces and get priority training. It was killing two birds with one stone. Half a month went by in a flash, and this half a month was full of surprises for Lin Yi and the others. Starting from Lingshan, everyone had been breaking through to Foundation establishment one after another. Even Ziyu and the others, who were the weakest among them, had all become Foundation establishment practitioners. This was an unbelievable miracle. Lin Dongfang couldn't help but smile as he looked at everyone excitedly having a bonfire party. You really don't plan on telling them? Chapter 5168. Haha, you're quite thoughtful, kid. You're starting to sound like a boss now. Lin Dongfang gave a rare nod of praise before continuing. But speaking of which, this demi-spirit state you've been using lately is really useful, being able to send the 5 elements' murderous energy into their bodies without anyone noticing. It's not easy at all. Just as Lin Dongfang said, the reason why Lingshan and the others were able to break through in this short half a month wasn't entirely because of their own hard work, it was mainly because of Lin Yi's secret guidance. Otherwise, even if some of them had succeeded, it'd only be a small portion, and it wouldn't have been like this. After all, breaking through was an extremely difficult thing, and unless Lin Yi directly helped them increase their strength like before, they couldn't afford to be distracted at all during the process, let alone be disturbed or affected in the slightest. As a result, even if he knew that they were all one step away, Lin Yi couldn't help them even if he wanted to. Even if he had a thorough understanding of the entire process, even if he had already thought of a way to use the murderous energy to guide them through the last step, he still couldn't do anything about it. Once Lin Yi got close, everyone would be affected and they'd lose that desperate state of breakthrough. It wouldn't be a matter of one step, and it wouldn't matter how much help Lin Yi gave them then. Fortunately, after this period of trial and error, Lin Yi could already familiarize himself with the demi-spirit state. This state had many uses. Not only could he avoid physical attacks like he did with Bing Wuqing, but there was also an unexpected benefit: he could freely control qi from afar. This was completely different from controlling the 5 elements killing qi after attacking in the past. Remote control of the 5 elements killing chi after attacking could at most be regarded as a kind of rough control, but it was absolutely impossible to rely on this to guide everyone to Foundation establishment. This process had to be extremely precise, and even if Lin Yi put his hand on them he might not be able to do it, much less control it from afar. However, the demi-spirit state he'd grasped made the impossible possible. This was because in this state, as long as it was within the range of his soul, he could freely control the killing intent of the 5 elements as if it was in his body. In particular, in this state, the senses of his soul were much more sensitive than usual. Using it to guide everyone through the final step was no longer a fantasy, but a reality. This is the result of months of hard work. If I can't even do something as simple as this, I'd cry myself to death. Lin Yi smiled faintly at the clueless crowd. Keep showing off. Lin Dongfang rolled his eyes. He'd seen everything from the beginning to the end, and knew that it was a pleasant surprise. This Lin Yi was getting thicker and thicker, and he didn't even blush when he was bragging. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile and said with some relief, "Fortunately, everyone reached Foundation building in time, or we wouldn't be able to make it to the next trial." Exanijia had already told him about the trial, and he intended to bring everyone to the Archean trials for a share of the loot. Naturally, he'd let everyone participate in the trial. Although the trial itself had no threshold, and even those with the strength of Heaven stage could participate, they would be the weakest. Not only would they not be able to achieve a satisfactory ranking, they might not even be able to guarantee their own safety, and that would not be worth it. But then again, even if everyone succeeded in reaching Foundation building, compared to the disciples of the Archean Alliance, their strength was almost at the bottom, and the situation was still not optimistic. Fortunately, they'd made up for the difference in quality, and there was a glimmer of hope. "Have you really decided?" Lin Dongfang asked. "Yes." Lin Yi nodded and said seriously, "After you told me those things, I always have a lingering sense of urgency. Not only do I have to improve my strength, but the people around me also have to think of ways to improve their strength. This time, the Archean trials is a very rare opportunity, and I don't want them to miss it." Before this, Lin Yi's attitude towards everyone participating in the Archean trials was still ambiguous, but now it was different. After knowing that the center of the trial was a powerful and omnipresent threat, if he didn't quickly improve everyone's strength, he wouldn't feel safe. If that's the case, then you have to put in some effort in this trial, or else if they only rely on themselves, it'll be difficult. Lin Dongfang raised his eyebrows. "Yes, but if the thing I want can be delivered in time, it can save a lot of trouble." Lin Yi smiled and looked up and down Lin Dongfang. "Don't waste your time, you can solve this trivial matter yourself. Don't always think of grabbing this old man's able-bodied men. In a few days I still have to go back to the West Star Mountain village." Lin Dongfang quickly said. "How do you know I want to grab able-bodied men?" "You guessed it pretty accurately." Lin Yi said, surprised. "Nonsense, as soon as you stick out your ass I know what shit you're going to shit. Do I still need to guess?" Lin Dongfang snorted. On Heaven Stage Island, Tian Chan and the others finally received Lin Yi's reply. When they learned that Lin Yi was safe and sound, they couldn't help but be overjoyed. They could finally relax after a few months. As for the matter that Lin Yi asked them to do in the letter, Wei Xinjin immediately went to do it. He was very familiar with the Middle Island, and it was the same for the black market. As long as there was enough spiritual jades, there was nothing that couldn't be bought. Sure enough, in just half a day, Wei Xinjin got 21 entry-level mental cultivation methods of each sect. After 3 days, the number had increased to as many as 32. Although it was still far from the number of sects on Heaven Stage Island, it was already quite a considerable number. These 32 entry-level mental cultivation methods were mainly from the sects on Middle Island and North Island. As for the other Heaven Stage Islands, they weren't included. South Island was the territory of the Spirit Beast clan, and there was no such thing as cultivating mental cultivation methods. West Island was an iron plate, and it was far from Middle Island. Naturally, the entry-level mental cultivation methods wouldn't wander into the black market of Middle Island. As for East Continent, it was needless to say that ordinary people couldn't get it at all. Even if they got it, they wouldn't have the guts to sell it in the black market. After all, the deterrent power of East Continent was not to be taken lightly. Chapter 5169. Although he could still gain something if he continued, it would definitely drag on for a long time, and the harvest would certainly not be too big. Therefore, after Wei Xinjin summarized these cultivation methods, he handed them over to Tian Chan, and then asked Okuda to send the letter out. Okuda did not feel that this was troublesome at all. Instead, he was very happy. If something really happened to Lin Yi in the secular world, he might come and help him. But since Lin Yi was safe and sound, he was still a potential stock worth trying to make friends with. This kind of small matter was naturally not a problem. If he could sell a favor with a casual greeting, he would be more than happy to do so. It had to be said that Okuda's face was really useful. The last time the center was willing to send a letter was already an exception. Now, with a casual greeting from him, Luan Xiaoru did not hesitate to give him the green light. But after seeing the thick stack of letters, he couldn't help but be surprised. When he opened them, he saw a variety of entry-level cultivation methods. Why did he get so much garbage? Luan Xiaoru casually muttered. These entry-level mental cultivation methods of various sects were worthless in her eyes. Even on the Heaven Stage Island, they were just common goods. Naturally, she would not take them seriously. She immediately sent someone to the secular world. After these things were sent to the secular world, Luan Xiaoru and the glasses doctor also muttered the same thing. However, without the permission of the main body, Luan Xiaoru, they did not dare to privately open Lin Yi's things. It was just that anyone who saw this thick stack of things would be curious. Those who did not know would think that they were recycling old newspapers. In any case, this collection of cultivation methods of the sects on Heavenstep Island was finally sent to Lin Yi. After skimming through it, Lin Yi could not help but be overjoyed. These things were just common goods on Heavenstep Island, but in his hands, especially at this critical moment when the Archaic Alliance appeared, it was priceless. Especially now, this summary of mental cultivation methods not only had long-term value, it also had the practical value of putting out a fire. Lin Yi gathered Lingshan and the others and asked Auntie Qing to make their specialties. The group chatted and laughed around the table, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. Ziyu spoke up first. Lin Yi bro, let's just set a rule. We'll meet every 3 days from now on. Look, we just had a campfire party 2 days ago, and now we can eat Auntie Qing's specialties. How nice is that? Yes, that's how it should be. Everyone agreed with a smile. Sure, as long as you're happy. Besides, everyone has been working hard during this period. We should relax a little. Lin Yi immediately agreed. Although he had been reunited with everyone for a few months, it was rare for them to have a proper and relaxed gathering like this. At first, they had to deal with the troublemaking disciples of the Archaic Alliance. Then they had to talk to Xianijia. After that, they came to this transit island. Although they had settled down, it was a pity that everyone was either busy building the Seaview Villa or cultivating non-stop. It wasn't just Lingshan and Qintian who were extremely responsible, but even Ziyu and the others who didn't have much of an interest in training, acted very conscientiously here. After all, they were surrounded by Archaic Alliance disciples, and this wasn't just a simple pressure. It was more of a sense of urgency. They didn't want to drag Lin Yi down. Especially when they'd been in seclusion for the past few months. They hadn't had a chance to gather with Lin Yi since the beginning, let alone relax like this. That's great. Ziyu jumped up in excitement and said something that made Lin Yi and the others smile. Why do I feel like I'm done with the exam? It's so relaxing. We've finally reached foundation after so long of closed-door training, but it's just a test. Everyone laughed. It was rare that they all succeeded, and it felt like the high school entrance exams. There were no test papers or textbooks, or they'd burn them all to celebrate. Well said, but your exam isn't over yet. Breaking through to foundation only means that you've gotten a pass. The real highlight is next. Lin Yi said, pouring cold water on them. Boss, you're talking about the test? Qintian couldn't help but ask. He was the first one to come out of seclusion, and the competition had become a common topic among almost all the Archaic Alliance disciples. You could hear about it just by walking around. It was impossible not to know. You can say that. Lin Yi nodded. He wanted to say that it was the Archaic Trials, but calling it the test wasn't wrong. If they couldn't even pass the test, then there was no point in talking about the Archaic Trials. We're participating as well? Lingshan paused and the others were curious as well. They'd been training on their own ever since they came to the Transfer Islands, and they didn't have anything to do with the Archaic Alliance. According to what Lin Yi said, this place was their future base, and they didn't think they'd need to interact with the Archaic Alliance. That's right. According to what I know, only those who obtain a certain ranking in the trials will have the qualifications to participate in the trials of the Archaic era. This is an extremely rare opportunity, and I hope that everyone will be able to participate. Archaic trials? Everyone looked at each other when they heard this. They were completely unprepared for this, but they had always followed Lin Yi's orders. Since Lin Yi had already said so, they wouldn't have any objections. After digesting it for a while, they all nodded in agreement. That's great. They're just going to travel overseas at most, but we're going to travel outside the world. It's so much better. Ziyu was very excited. The group couldn't help but smile. Linny smiled. Sure, then you might as well write a travel book about the archaic Jianghu. I guarantee you'll be the only one in the world. Sure, but if we really go to the archaic Jianghu, will we be able to come back? Ziyu asked the question that was on everyone's mind. The Archaic Alliance's test happened once every 1,000 years, and even if they could live that long, the entire world might be gone after 1,000 years, let alone their friends and family. Chapter 5170. Then there's no problem. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief in unison. Even though they wanted to improve their strength as soon as possible, it wasn't too realistic for them to really give up everything in the mortal world for this. It couldn't be any better if they were able to freely travel between the primeval underworld and the mortal world. The competition isn't far away. Relax is relax, but we still need to familiarize ourselves with the foundational level. Don't ask for too much, just get used to it. Understand? Linny said. Boss, even if we get used to it, we're still just the weakest early phase of foundational. It's not going to be a good idea to participate in the competition with this level of strength, right? Yu Bing frowned. Everyone followed Lin Yi and had high spirits, but thinking that their opponents in the competition were all from the Archaic Alliance, they couldn't help but feel nervous. After all, they were on a completely different level. It's a bit difficult, but I got this from Tian Chan on Sky Class Island. It'll come in handy. Lin Yi smiled faintly. What is it? Everyone took the thick stack of papers from Lin Yi's hands and passed them around. A compilation of all the entry-level arts on Sky Class Island? That's right. I asked Tian Chan to get this. With this, you'll have a better chance in the competition. Lin Yi nodded. How do we use these? Could it be that they want us to cultivate these mental cultivation methods? We don't have enough time, do we? Everyone was still confused. Although there was a chance to change the cultivation method after reaching the foundation establishment stage, it wasn't something that could be done overnight. No matter how good one's aptitude was, it would be difficult to have any effect without a few months of practice. Those with average aptitude would need a few years of painstaking practice before they could have a small success. What was the use of these few days? Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not telling you to practice these arts. It's just for the competition. As for how to do it, I'll explain it to you after I finish studying it. Lin Yi shook his head with a smile. If he really wanted to find a practitioner's art for everyone, he wouldn't be looking for these common beginner's arts. He had to find a more advanced one that was suitable for everyone's characteristics. They didn't understand what Lin Yi meant, but since he wanted to keep them in suspense, they could only wait. They were the ones participating in the competition, and Lin Yi would give them some advice sooner or later. Right, big bro Lin Yi, how many people did you find on Sky Class Island these years? You haven't told us about them yet. Ziyu asked. Everyone perked up their ears. Lin Yi did tell them about his experiences on Sky Class Island, but it wasn't practical to tell them everything one by one. He could only tell them what he knew, and they were curious about Ziyu's question as well. About that? Let me count. Lin Yi sighed and counted with his fingers. Tian Chan, Sydney, Han Jingjing, Wang Xinyan. There's only 4 of them now. Other than that, there's Zhong Pingliang and Xiao Ran. Zhong Pingliang betrayed us before, and Xiao Ran only got close to us after coming to Sky Class Island. Then what about Qin Shi? Ziyu asked eagerly. I'm not sure. Lin Yi sighed. Qin Shi had gone with Tian Chan and Tian Dai, but he'd only found Tian Chan alone on the middle island, not Qin Shi and Tian Dai. It wasn't hard to guess that Qin Shi and Tian Dai were separated during the teleportation, so even Tian Chan didn't know where the 2 girls were. Otherwise, Tian Chan would have mentioned it before Lin Yi even asked. Ziyu couldn't help but feel disappointed. Will something happen to her? I don't think so. Sky Class Island is huge and it's normal that we can't find them now. But I'll find them sooner or later. Lin Yi patted Ziyu's shoulder and comforted her. On the other side, Lingshan wanted to say something as well. Lin Yi knew that she was worried about her sister, Song Lingrui, and could only give her a comforting look. Although he was comforting everyone, Lin Yi was actually more worried than Ziyu and the others. He was just forcing himself to be calm in front of everyone. After all, this was different from when he first went to Sky Class Island. At that time, he didn't know much about Sky Class Island, and he thought that the other islands would be as peaceful and stable as the North. As long as he had the chance to go out, he'd be able to reunite with these people. But now he was all over the East, West, South and Center Islands, and most of them were still missing. Lin Yi didn't care about those people who had nothing to do with him. He didn't care if they were dead or alive, but Qin Shi, Tian Dai, Bingtang and Song Lingrui were people he had to find no matter what. He couldn't be at ease as long as he didn't hear from them. With that thought, Lin Yi's excitement died down. He was speechless. Even with his current strength and connections, he still couldn't find the whereabouts of these people. He didn't even dare to think about what this meant. He could only run away subconsciously. At the very least, he was sure that the North, Middle, and West Islands didn't have these people. Otherwise, Lin Yi would have found out already. The reason was simple. Even if they were sent to different sky-tier islands during the teleportation process, the practitioners of each island would gather together at the beginning. Tian Chan and Shueli were at the Middle Island, Han Jingjing was at the West Island, and Lin Yi was at the North Island. If Chen Shi and the others were also sent to these three islands, they should be able to meet each other. However, another possibility couldn't be completely ruled out, and that was, there might not be only one transmission point on the same island. As far as Lin Yi knew, there was only one transmission point on the North Island, but it might not be the same for the Middle and West Islands. He hadn't investigated it carefully, let alone the South and East Islands. However, even if this was the case, Lin Yi was still sure that these people didn't exist in the North, Middle, and West Islands. After all, he had a good relationship with the high-level leaders of these three islands. The deputy island owner of the North Island, Shanghai Tianhua, was his half-master, and the island owner of the West Island, Ning Shangling, was his future mother-in-law. The acting island owner of the Middle Island, Okuda, was also deliberately trying to make friends with him. Chapter 5171. As for the eastern and southern continents, Lin Yi had been there before, and he had some connections there, but his influence in those two places paled in comparison to the other three. The only place he'd been to in the eastern continent was the Golden Class Ocean, and that was only in Skycloud, Morning Star, and Thunder Plains. He didn't know much about it, not to mention the legendary Mystic Class Ocean. There were even higher levels of oceans. Lin Yi doubted that any new person from the common world would be able to survive after being teleported there. Xinyan was lucky to have met the Eastern Sea's Divine Nun, but if she wasn't, then it'd be hard to say. Lin Yi couldn't help but think of that girl from the common world that Yao Jelly had tortured. She might be one of them. If being teleported to the East Continent was considered a bad draw, being teleported to the South Continent would be the worst draw with a slim chance of survival. The South Continent sea area alone was already chaotic and dangerous, especially if they were teleported to the inland of the South Island, which was the territory of the Spirit Beast clan, which was known as the Forbidden Area for humans. Once they were teleported there, they would not survive and would definitely be killed immediately. Eastern Continent, Southern Continent. No matter where they were teleported to, it wouldn't be good news, but if they weren't teleported to these two places, then the news would be even worse. If they were teleported to the North, Middle, and West Islands, and there was no news from them, then there was only one worst-case scenario. They'd all met with misfortune. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat at the thought. People were like that. Once they were down, it was easy for them to get stuck in a dead end, unable to pull themselves out. The more they thought about it, the more wrong they'd get, and in the end they'd really be stuck in a dead end. Lin Yi, are you alright? Ling Shan and the others looked at each other, worried at Lin Yi's face. Lin Yi had always been so confident and optimistic in front of them. What was going on? Oh, I'm fine, just a little distracted. Lin Yi smiled dryly. Really? The others were still worried. It's true. Lin Yi nodded. He didn't dare to tell everyone the truth. After all, everything was just speculation before he got the exact information. He didn't want everyone to worry for nothing. After this incident, everyone's mood was more or less dampened. The originally joyous gathering had to come to an abrupt end, and Lingshan and the others dispersed to rest. Lin Yi, however, was stopped by Dongfang. You want to slip away after eating? Do you think this is a restaurant? Go and wash the dishes. Lin Dongfang curled his lips in annoyance. Lin Yi glanced at the table full of empty plates and suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just now, everyone was frowning, but their mouths weren't idle at all. They licked the plates quite clean. What are you waiting for? Wash the dishes. Dongfang was still rushing him, but he suddenly said, There's nothing to worry about, they won't die yet. The words came out of nowhere, but Lin Yi understood immediately that the old man was comforting him. He smiled bitterly, I'll accept your words of comfort, but I know what I'm doing. It doesn't look too good. Know what? What do you know? Dongfang laughed. I haven't found any news of them yet, but I've been on Sky Class Island for 3 years, and I've made a name for myself. Even if I haven't confirmed some things, I can still make deductions. Lin Yi sighed. He had to force a smile in front of Lingshan and the others, but there was no need for it in front of old Lin. That's a deduction and mine is a divination. Which one do you think is more accurate? Dongfang said with interest. Divination? What divination? Lin Yi blinked. You don't even know about divination? You're pretty ignorant. Dongfang said disdainfully. Wait, isn't divination a superstition? How can you believe in something like that? Lin Yi couldn't help but be surprised. Who told you that divination is a superstition? You're calling something you don't know superstition? You're not at a low level anymore, can you not be so childish? Dongfang curled his lips and explained, Listen up, divination is a very mysterious ancient art. It's hard to say that it's 100% accurate every time, but if it's done by a master, then it's very trustworthy. Ancient art? That's real? Lin Yi's face was full of shock. Something as mysterious as divination was like the talk of ghosts and gods in the eyes of normal people. Even he had always thought that it was just a trick to fool old men and old women. He didn't think that Lin Dongfang would actually say that there was such a thing. Remember, don't jump to conclusions about things that you haven't seen with your own eyes. I can tell you very clearly that divination does exist. However, the number of experts who have truly mastered this ancient secret technique can be counted on one hand, Lin Dongfang said with a serious expression. Yes, I'll remember that. Lin Yi nodded solemnly. But what does this have to do with Chen Shi and the others? You're saying that a master has divined their fates? That's right. From the results of the divination, their lives aren't in danger yet, so you don't have to worry. Dongfang nodded. That's good, that's good. Lin Yi finally let out a breath of relief, but he was still curious. Speaking of which, where did you find this fortune teller, sir? Why don't you introduce me to him and let me broaden my horizons? It's about luck to meet such a master. The luck hasn't come yet. Just wait. Lin Dongfang said insincerely. In fact, Lin Yi had already met him before. Lin Yi had already believed it, but now he was starting to wonder again. What opportunity? You didn't make this up to tease me, did you? It's up to you to believe it or not. Lin Dongfang rolled his eyes at him and urged, Hurry up and wash the dishes. Don't be so slow. Are you dawdling? Before he finished, Aunt Qing suddenly shouted, Don't even think about being lazy. We'll wash the dishes together. Aunt Qing is wise. Lin Yi hurriedly flattered the old man, amused by the look of resentment on old Lin's face. Everything had its counter after all. 5 days passed in a flash. On this day, Jianghu deliberately suspended the seabed mining and gathered all the disciples of the Archaic Alliance, including the apprentices. Except for Lin Dongfang and Aunt Qing who went back to the West Star Mountain village to drink water, Lin Yi and the others also attended. Chapter 5172. Everyone had expected this. They were all excited and rubbed their palms together, eager to give it a try. The trial competition is an old tradition of the Archaic Alliance. I'm sure everyone is familiar with it. However, it's the first time for some of the disciples, so I'll have to explain to everyone what the trial competition is. Jianghu smiled and continued, The trial competition, as the name suggests, is a preparation for the primordial trial. The purpose of this competition is to see if everyone's strength is qualified to participate in the primordial trial. This is also for everyone's safety. After all, the primordial trial is very dangerous. If you're not strong enough, you might die in vain. Martial Uncle XN, may I know how to be considered strong enough? Could it be that there's a realm of strength? Only those who are above this realm are qualified, and those who are below this realm are not qualified to participate in the archaic trials? Someone asked impatiently. That's not the case. Even though it's simple and clear, it doesn't conform to the objective of our primeval trials. Everyone must remember that the primeval trials isn't a simple trial. It only exists for a single purpose, and that is to allow those disciples with true strength to distinguish themselves and become the important fostered targets of the various primeval sects and clans. Jianghu paused and added, Of course, the strength I'm talking about doesn't just refer to the realm. More importantly, it's also about the potential. You should know that a genius with outstanding potential, even if he's only in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, is definitely not any less valuable than a Foundation Establishment realm expert in the perfected Foundation Establishment realm. Then how do we determine the potential and talent? Do we look at the spiritual root? Everyone asked. The spiritual root is only one aspect. It's too narrow to only look at the spiritual root. After all, there are many so-called geniuses with outstanding spiritual roots but eventually become mediocre. Therefore, the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance have unanimously decided that only the disciples with outstanding performance in actual combat are the real geniuses that are worth cultivating. Jianghu said seriously. Actual combat? How does that work? Everyone didn't understand what was going on. Although there would always be a grand refinement competition before every primordial refinement competition, the content of every grand refinement competition would be different. In the early days there was a time where everything was cut off, but in the recent times, there were all sorts of mutual competitions. There were internal competitions between various sects, and there were also group competitions between sections. There were all sorts of forms and every time it would be different. Improvisation is also an ability that must be tested. Forgive me for keeping you in suspense for the specific content of the contest. The contest will officially begin 3 days later. I'll explain it to you in detail then. You just need to go back and get yourself ready, said Xianijia with a smile. The people wanted to ask more, but Xianijia was the leader of the team after all, and he was a golden core stage expert. Since he had said so, they dared not ask further. However, Shui Jianfeng did not have such concerns. He was also a golden core stage expert now, so he did not take Xianijia seriously. He immediately said in a sarcastic tone, "Uncle Xn, what you said sounds nice, but who knows if you will secretly reveal it to your own people in advance. I'm afraid it's not fair to everyone, right?" The people were already muttering in their hearts. After being incited by him, their expressions suddenly changed. Everything else was fine, but they were worried about the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. Xianijia had always had a good image, but no one would believe that he was fair and selfless without any selfishness. At least, the disciples of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island would leak some information in advance. It did not seem to be a big deal, but one was well prepared while the other was caught off guard. When it came to the real trial competition, their performance was very different. Even if it was just their wishful thinking, the slightest bit of unfairness would be magnified infinitely in this kind of competition and examination. Everyone would feel that they would be the victim, and eventually the crowd would be so agitated that it would get out of hand. "Shui Jianfeng, are you suspecting that I'm unfair?" Xianijia's face darkened and he snorted coldly. "No, I dare not. But I think it's better to be open and transparent about things like the trial competition, so that people won't talk behind my back and suspect me. I'm doing this for your own good, Uncle Exa. What do you guys think?" Shui Jianfeng said carelessly. "Yes, senior brother Shui is right." The crowd agreed in unison. The crowd was so agitated that Xianijia did not dare to suppress it by force. He snorted with a gloomy face and said, "Very well, you're right. But it's a pity that I still can't tell you the content of the competition, because even I don't know it yet. So far, I've only set a general tone. As for the specific competition items, the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance are still discussing it. The competition items will be sent here on time in 3 days and we'll know then." The crowd immediately looked at each other. Since even the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance were still discussing it, there was nothing to doubt. "Do you have any more questions? It's better to raise them all at once so that some people won't gossip behind your back again." Xianijia looked at Shui Jianfeng and said. Shui Jianfeng had repeatedly contradicted him, the leading martial uncle. Even if he had a mild temperament, it was impossible for him to swallow his anger. His stance showed that he was going against Shui Jianfeng. If it was someone else, they would have backed off long ago. However, Shui Jianfeng did not put Xianijia in his eyes at all. After all, he had too many things to rely on. Not to mention that he was an early-stage gold core expert. He had the support of the deputy head of the Snowsword faction for his father. Most importantly, he had the support of this huge and mysterious organization. With his usual arrogance, it would be strange if he still respected Xianijia. "I have another question. Does everyone in the Transit Islands have to participate in this trial competition?" Shui Jianfeng opened his mouth and asked, but his eyes were on Lin Yi and the others. He did not know that Lin Yi had already made up his mind to let everyone participate in the trial competition. He was afraid that they would not take the bait. Not necessarily. The archaic trials have never forced anyone to participate. The same goes for the trial competition. It's up to the individual whether they want to participate or not. However, if they give up the trial competition, it's equivalent to giving up the opportunity to participate in the archaic trials, Xianijia said indifferently. The answer was not surprising, but it made Shui Jianfeng's face a little pale. The plan that he proposed to the bespectacled doctor had the most basic premise, which was that Lin Yi and the others had to participate in the trial competition. Otherwise he would be helpless. However, this was different from the mining at the bottom of the sea. After all, to the people present, participating in the trial competition was not an unacceptable obligation. Instead, it was a privilege that most people yearned for from the bottom of their hearts. Chapter 5173. After thinking about it, Shui Jianfeng had no choice but to say, The primordial trial this time is a rare event that happens once in 1,000 years. I've long heard about how good it is, but I don't know if the rumors are true or not. Why don't you take this opportunity to tell us about it, Uncle Master Xen? Xianijia frowned and looked at Shui Jianfeng strangely. What is this guy talking about? What is he trying to do? Seeing Xianijia's indifferent expression, Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but secretly spit. However, he had no other way to lure Lin Yi and the others. Since he couldn't threaten them, he could only tempt them with benefits. He quickly coughed and winked at Bing Wuqing. With Bing Wuqing's character, of course, she wouldn't do such a boring thing with him. However, she remembered that the bespectacled doctor had told her that Shui Jianfeng would be in charge of everything related to the trial competition. Therefore, even he couldn't be too disrespectful or he would be suspected. Elder Xen, I don't know much about this and I believe everyone is the same. Why don't we satisfy everyone's curiosity? Bing Wuqing could only bite the bullet and play along. That's right. Since the trial competition is a preparation for the primordial trial, it's reasonable to explain the uniqueness of the primordial trial in advance. At least everyone will have an idea. Uncle Master Xen, you're the Uncle Master leading the team. This is also your responsibility, isn't it? Shui Jianfeng hurriedly rephrased his words again. That's right, Martial Uncle Xen, please tell us about it. The others were also mobilized. At this point, Xianijia had no choice but to say it. Moreover, it wasn't a secret, so it was not a bad idea to satisfy everyone's curiosity. Alright, but this trial ground only happens once in 1,000 years. I only have a rough idea and it's not accurate. Just take it as a reference for everyone. Xianijia pondered for a while, then said, any place that can be chosen as a trial ground will definitely have treasures of heaven and earth. This trial ground will definitely have more treasures than other places. However, at the same time, the number of guardian beasts and various dangerous factors will also increase. Everyone should be mentally prepared for this. Everyone nodded and hurriedly asked, what are the special benefits of this trial ground? Martial Uncle Xen, please tell us in detail. As far as I know, the most eye-catching place in this trial ground is a river called the River of Divine Sense. As the name suggests, you can refine your divine sense by staying in it. I believe I don't need to explain the benefits, said Xianijia. River of Divine Knowledge. Everyone's eyes brightened. The Archaic Alliance had always attached great importance to the cultivation of divine sense, and there were very few places that could temper divine sense in the entire ancient Jianghu. Moreover, all of them were in the hands of the 4 great sects and clans. Aside from their core disciples, no one else could get close. They didn't expect that there would be a divine sense river in this trial ground. It was truly worthy of being a once-in-1,000 years opportunity. Not only the crowd but even Lin Yi couldn't help but feel refreshed. He didn't pay much attention to the cultivation of divine sense in the past, but his mentality was completely different now. It was not only because he was now a primordial spirit, but more importantly, he was increasingly aware of the importance of the cultivation of divine sense. If one's physical strength was the hardware, then the cultivation of the primordial spirit was the software. The two complemented each other and couldn't be dispensed with. It didn't matter when his realm was still low, but when he reached his current realm, he was about to break through to the magnate realm. If the cultivation of the primordial spirit was still so weak, it would be like losing one of his 2 legs. How could he walk? When his primordial spirit was projected back to the secular world, it was already a rare surprise for Lin Yi to get the starring charcoal from Lung Lung. He didn't expect that there would be a divine sense river in the ancient trial ground. It was a great opportunity. Previously he only wanted to explore the ancient Jianghu. Now that he heard Xianijia's words, he suddenly felt excited. Not only that, legend has it that the river of divine sense can not only refine divine sense, but there are also unparalleled treasures buried in the river. Xianijia sighed. Treasures? What treasures? Everyone's curiosity was piqued. I don't know about this. If you're interested, you can try it yourself when you get there. Xianijia smiled faintly. Great. Since the legend is so magical, it must be a peerless treasure. By then we'll use our own skills to get it. Shui Jianfeng took the opportunity to instigate. Senior brother Shui, you're right. Everyone agreed in unison. Xianijia smiled without saying a word. Although he didn't know what treasures it was, since the legend was passed down after 1,000 years, it was obvious that the treasures must be extraordinary. How could a random disciple in the foundation building stage possess it? Putting aside whether these people had the opportunity and luck, even if they did encounter it, it was hard to tell whether it would be a blessing or a curse. They might even lose their lives. They really didn't know their limits. However, as the junior uncle leading the team, it was not appropriate for him to say these words. Anyway, everyone was just fantasizing. It was not worthwhile to dampen their enthusiasm for such a small matter. While everyone was feeling excited, Shui Jianfeng had been observing the reactions of Lin Yi and the others. In contrast, he was much colder, especially Lin Yi, who did not say a word. He did not seem to be moved at all. Shui Jianfeng muttered to himself, "He's still not taking the bait. This guy is quite calm." Therefore he thought about it and said deliberately, "Since there are so many benefits in the Archean trials, naturally, only the disciples of the Archean Alliance can participate. Those unrelated people in the secular world don't have this qualification, right?" This. Xianijia looked at Lin Yi awkwardly. He did not know what Lin Yi meant, so it was not appropriate for him to respond in public. Lin Yi was speechless. Shui Jianfeng's little trick was too obvious and low-level. However, since he had already decided to bring everyone to participate in the Archean trials, he could only go along with him and said, "So what you're saying is that we can't participate?" "That's not necessarily true. However, Junior Uncle Xian just said that if anyone doesn't participate in the trials, it means that they have given up on the Archean trials. I don't care about anything else, but I'm afraid that some people will enter through the back door." Shui Jianfeng sneered. As soon as he said this, everyone looked at Lin Yi and the others with suspicious eyes. They could not even tolerate a little bit of unfairness, let alone Lin Yi and the others entering through the back door. Chapter 5174. Lin Yi was waiting for Shui Jianfeng to say that. He smiled, "Alright, it's just a test. We'll participate." "That's more like it." Only then did Shui Jianfeng smile in satisfaction. The rest didn't matter. To him, as long as Lin Yi and the others could participate in the competition, his plan would be halfway to success. "Alright, we've said what we need to say. Go back and prepare yourselves," Xianijia announced. Everyone dispersed to rest and prepare for the competition in 3 days. Lin Yi, on the other hand, gathered Ling Shan and the others together. There's only 3 days left, but as the saying goes, sharpening a spear at the last minute isn't the fastest, but it'll still help. Otherwise the competition won't be easy to fool. "Boss, it's only 3 days, isn't it too late?" Qintian smiled bitterly. "It's not late, not at all." Lin Yi smiled and said to everyone, "As long as you remember what I'm about to teach you, I don't know if it'll be useful for anything else, but it should be useful for the upcoming competition." "What is it? 3 days?" the group asked curiously. It's nothing profound. Do you still remember the summary of the practitioner's arts I received a few days ago?" Lin Yi smiled. "Yes, but those are the arts of the sects on Sky-class Island, right?" "What's the use?" Ling Shan asked curiously. Judging from the North Island's Blue Cloud sect and other clues, Sky-class Island and the immemorial small Jianghu are inextricably linked. The same sects in these two places practice basically the same mental cultivation. So although this is a summary of the mental cultivation of the sects in Sky-class Island, it can also be said to be a summary of the mental cultivation of the immemorial sections. Lin Yi explained. The group nodded, but they were still confused. What does that have to do with the test? It's simple. Since we have the arts of the sects, we can use it to figure out the fighting style of the disciples and grasp their strengths and weaknesses. From there, we can come up with the most effective strategy. I've also created some counter moves while studying the manuals, Lin Yi said. Counter moves? The group's eyes lit up. That's right, there aren't many. Each sect only has 2 or 3 moves and they're not complicated, simple and practical. If you guys can learn these moves in 3 days, the benefits will be obvious. Lin Yi nodded. Fuck. Boss, you're not just making us cram at the last minute, you're bringing a cheat sheet with you. If we learn all of this, we'll be able to beat the disciples of the ancient sects in the test. Qintian said happily. That's not necessarily the case. In order for the counter moves I've taught you to be effective, you need to have a certain level of strength. If the opponent's strength is too much higher than yours, then it won't be effective. But if that's the case, there's no point thinking about it. It's better to just surrender. Lin Yi smiled and said, Alright, time's running out. Let's start. Alright. Everyone replied in unison. 3 days later, everyone on the transit islands gathered again, including Xianijia. Everyone was staring at the teleportation formation eagerly. Finally, a white light flashed and a scroll appeared in the portal. Xianijia opened it immediately, and the rules of the test were written on it. Xianijia looked through the entire document and nodded while stroking his beard. He then announced, Everyone listen carefully. What I'm about to say is the rules of this trial. If you miss a word, it'll be your loss. Yes, the group listened attentively. First, the test will be divided into 8 teams. Those below Foundation Establishment will be in one team. Early Stage Foundation Establishment, Peak Early Stage Foundation Establishment, Mid-Stage Foundation Establishment, Peak Mid-Stage Foundation Establishment, Late Stage Foundation Establishment, Peak Late Stage Foundation Establishment, and Perfect Stage Foundation Establishment will be in their own team. Everyone, please take your seats. Now, please get into your teams, Xianijia ordered, and the group began to line up according to their strength. At this moment, no one would play any tricks. Firstly, they did not know the intention of such a team. Secondly, there were no secrets between the brothers in the sect. They knew each other's strength and realm clearly. Moreover, Xianijia, a gold core stage master, was watching them. It was impossible to fool them even if they wanted to. Lin Yi gave the group a look and Lingshan and the others nodded, walking into the group of early phase foundations. This caused quite a commotion. A lot of people didn't realize that they'd all succeeded, thinking that they were still Sky Class full mastery. But they were just surprised for a moment, not really taking Lingshan and the others seriously. After all, even if they succeeded in their foundation establishment, they were just the weakest early stage. They posed no threat to Archaic Alliance disciples, so naturally they didn't have to worry about them. As for Lin Yi himself, while he was the elder master of the Green Cloud sect, that identity was only useful in front of people like Xianijia. The Archaic Alliance didn't recognize that. Being able to recognize him as a member of the Archaic Alliance was already giving face to the Green Cloud sect. If he wanted to participate in the Archaic test, he had to pass the test like everyone else. Lin Yi didn't mind at all. He walked into the group of perfect stage practitioners. No one below Golden Core would be his match, no matter what the test was. But there was one exception. It was Shui Jianfeng, who was smiling coldly at the side. This guy had been following the professor's orders and didn't show his strength. On the surface he was still a perfect stage practitioner. He couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. If it weren't for the strict order from above not to touch Lin Yi, he would have killed Lin Yi to avenge himself. I can't kill him, but this is a fair opportunity. I can use this chance to beat him up. Even the higher-ups can't say anything about it, Shui Jianfeng thought. In the blink of an eye, everyone had lined up. Only two people stood outside. One was Xianijia and the other was Bing Wuqing. While they weren't the leader, they were still Golden Core practitioners. There was no point in them participating in the test. Alright, I will now announce the rules of the test. It's simple. Every team will draw lots to fight each other. There will be a round every 2 days for 10 consecutive days, and there will be a total of 5 rounds. As long as you win 3 rounds, you'll automatically qualify for the test, Xianijia announced. Chapter 5175. On the other hand, if one couldn't even win 3 matches, then no matter how superior one's spirit root was, it would be meaningless. There were indeed times when a genius would be buried, but if one couldn't even win 3 out of 5 matches, then he would be a complete piece of trash, and it would be meaningless to talk about anything else. After observing the crowd's reaction, Xianijia continued, of course this rule only applies to most of the ordinary disciples. For those genius disciples with extraordinary strength, other than winning 3 out of 5 battles, there's another easier option, which is to challenge someone of a higher level. Challenge someone of a higher level? Everyone was shocked. This was something unimaginable for ordinary disciples, but it was also the label of a genius disciple. Those who could challenge someone of a higher level were not easy to deal with. Naturally, they were considered as genius disciples. That's right. You can challenge anyone of a higher level. There's no limit to the number of times, and the other party can't refuse. As long as one of you can succeed once, then you won't have to participate in the regular competition and will automatically qualify for the trial. Xianijia nodded. Everyone's expressions were different. Apart from the normal rules, there was also a special rule. This grand competition was well thought out. It was clear that the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance attached great importance to this. Because of this, they had to think of a way to perform well. This wasn't just related to the primeval smelting trials, it was also related to their future in the Archaic Alliance. Marshal Uncle Xen, may I ask, what will happen if you can't challenge someone of a higher level, or win 3 out of 5 battles in the regular competition? Everyone couldn't help but be worried. That means you don't qualify for the trial. You'll be sent back to the archaic underworld after the trial in the secular world. Of course, even if you win 3 out of 5 battles, you have to break through to the Foundation Establishment realm before the archaic trials begins. Otherwise, you'll be automatically removed from the Archaic Alliance, and naturally, you won't be qualified to participate in the archaic trials. Xianijia explained. As soon as this was said, everyone looked at each other. According to Xianijia's explanation, wouldn't it mean that half of the people would be eliminated? Even though the grand competition would be held in the primeval trials in the past, and some people would be eliminated every single time, it would at most be a formality, and some people at the bottom of the rankings would be eliminated. There had never been a precedent of half of the people being eliminated. After all, the grand competition was only the prelude to the primeval trials, and it wasn't the primeval competition, so how could it be so serious? Marshal Uncle X in, this is the grand competition and not the primordial grand competition. There's no need to go so far, right? It's not normal. However, the primordial trial this time is a once-in-a-thousand-years event. The degree of danger is far more than usual. It's reasonable for the trial competition to be stricter. This is to be responsible for your safety, Xianijia said seriously. But if it's really for safety reasons, it's better to let us, the stronger disciples, go. There's no need to make it so complicated, right? The one who spoke was a late Foundation establishment disciple. The other stronger disciples of the Archaic Alliance echoed him, all of them filled with righteous indignation. Now, with the rules of 3 wins out of 5 duels, the biggest victims were none other than them. Disciples like them who were at the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm or even higher should have the qualifications to participate in the primeval trials. However, once this rule was announced, even amongst them, a group of people would inevitably be eliminated. Think about it. If even dignified disciples at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm didn't have the chance to participate in the primeval trials, wouldn't they become the laughingstock of others if word of this got out? This is the unanimous decision of the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance. Do any of you have any objections? Xianijia's words stunned everyone. No matter how dissatisfied they were, they would never dare to go against the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance. Otherwise, not only would their future be in danger, they might even lose their lives. Moreover, although they were not weak, the ones who were really dissatisfied with this rule were only those disciples who were at the bottom of the same level. The truly outstanding core disciples of each sect would not care about this little difficulty. To put it bluntly, only the weak would complain like this. Since they were the weak, how could they have the confidence to go against the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance? If it were Bing Wuqing facing these people's complaints, she would at most snort coldly and would not even bother to explain. However, Xianijia was much more honest. Seeing that everyone seemed to be dissatisfied, he thought about it and decided to explain a little. I've already said that the purpose of this trial competition is to select disciples who have both strength and potential. Moreover, the rules of the competition are not that strict. If you really meet the requirements, it won't be difficult to qualify for the trials. However, if you only have the level but no potential, then there's nothing much to say. Instead of going to the primeval trials and hindering other disciples with more potential, it's better for you to return to the primeval Jianghu as soon as possible, said Xianijia. His words were not very pleasant to hear, but it was the truth. From the perspective of each primeval sect, the value of a disciple with Foundation establishment consummation at the bottom was far less than that of a disciple with outstanding aptitude in the early stage of Foundation establishment consummation. However, if these two people were to go to the primeval trials at the same time, the disciple with Foundation establishment consummation would definitely benefit. After all, under normal circumstances, a disciple in the early stage of Foundation establishment consummation would not be a match for a disciple with Foundation establishment consummation. Therefore, it would easily lead to a situation that would be extremely troublesome for the higher-ups of all primeval sects. In the primeval trials, those talented disciples with outstanding aptitude who were worthy of being nurtured would find it difficult to advance. Instead, their opportunities would be snatched away by high-level disciples with no potential at the bottom. However, even the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance could not force that only those talented disciples could obtain the opportunities. Even if the other disciples were of a higher level and stronger strength, they had to stand aside. If such an inhumane rule was really announced, many ordinary disciples would have long rebelled. That was why there was such an unprecedented rule. Not only could it be used to select outstanding disciples of different levels, but it could also be used to eliminate those mediocre disciples who only had high levels but were actually at the bottom. It could be said that it was killing 2 birds with 1 stone to clear the obstacles for those talented disciples who were truly worthy of being nurtured. At this point, even if everyone was unwilling in their hearts, they didn't dare say anything more. After all, the matter had already been decided, and it would be useless no matter how much they grumbled. Instead, it would bring trouble to themselves, so it was better to make use of this time to properly plan for the upcoming grand competition. Chapter 5176. Everyone looked at each other and no one spoke for a while. Challenging someone of a higher level was no small matter, not to mention that the bird that sticks out gets shot first. In this kind of situation, whoever was the first to step out to challenge someone of a higher level would be in the limelight, but at the same time, they would also be under a great deal of pressure. This was especially true for the high-level disciple they challenged. He would definitely go all out. Otherwise, if he was defeated by someone of a higher level in front of everyone, he would not be able to face anyone in the future. Lin Yi was a foundation perfection practitioner, and he was already the highest level in the tournament. Naturally, there was no such thing as challenging someone of a higher level. As for Ling Shan and the others, they were only at foundation establishment not long ago, and naturally wouldn't think of challenging someone of a higher level. As a result, they waited patiently for the lots to be drawn. Half an hour passed and still no one stood out to challenge someone of a higher level. Xan Ijie coughed dryly and was about to announce the draw when someone finally spoke up, "Uncle Xan, why don't I try?" The crowd went into an uproar at the words, and all eyes focused on a young man. He had delicate features and a calm aura around him. He looked like he had nothing to do with the world, but if one looked closely, they would realize that there was an indescribable aura hidden within his calmness. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh to himself. This kid was extraordinary. Ling Tianyu of the Thousand Blades sect, who would you like to challenge? Xianijia asked. Facing this Ling Tianyu, even he, as the leader of the group, didn't dare to be careless. One had to know that this kid was the young master of the Thousand Blades sect, and this wasn't as simple as being a second-generation practitioner. Ever since the previous head of the Thousand Blades sect died in the hands of a heretic, Ling Tianyu had become the head of the Thousand Blades sect at a young age. Even though he was only at the peak of the late phase of foundation establishment, he still received the support of the entire sect. This was not only because he had the bloodline of the former sect master, but also because the ancient Jianghu was a world where strength was respected. Without strength, bloodline inheritance was just a joke. The reason why Ling Tianyu was able to gain the recognition of the Thousand Blades faction with his cultivation at the peak of the late foundation establishment realm was naturally not because of absolute strength, but because of his incomparable talent. It was rumored that the strongest foundation establishment cultivator of the Archaic Alliance was Shui Jianfeng of the Snow Sword faction, but that was only because Shui Jianfeng was very high profile. On the other hand, as the young master of the Thousand Blades faction, Ling Tianyu was extremely low-key and rarely fought with others. Only the inner disciples of the Thousand Blades faction knew a thing or two about him. If the two of them really had a chance to fight, it would be very difficult to say who would win. On the contrary, more people would favor Yin Tianyu as he was the uncrowned king. This will be interesting. Ling Tianyu will definitely challenge Shui Jianfeng. This is the battle for the #1 foundation establishment cultivator of the Ancient Alliance. Everyone couldn't help but be excited. Ling Tianyu was an expert at the peak of the late foundation establishment realm. He could only challenge those at the peak of the foundation establishment realm, and his representative was Shui Jianfeng. Who was stronger between Shui Jianfeng and Ling Tianyu? This was a point that had been debated endlessly. It was a pity that the two of them had never met each other. Now they could finally have a showdown in front of everyone. It seemed that this kid really wanted to challenge him? Shui Jianfeng muttered to himself. To be honest, if he was still an expert at the peak of the foundation establishment realm, he might really be a little afraid. After all, Ling Tianyu was no small matter. But now that he was at the early gold core realm, there was nothing to worry about. No matter how powerful Ling Tianyu was, could he, as a mere peak of the late foundation establishment realm, challenge an early gold core realm? What a joke. Martial Uncle Xn, the person I want to challenge is him. Ling Tianyu smiled slightly and his gaze fell on a person. This time the crowd was in an uproar again. The person he wanted to challenge was not Shui Jianfeng but Lin Yi. You want to challenge me? Lin Yi was also a little stunned. Yes, this should be fine, right? Ling Tianyu confirmed with his trademark gentle smile on his face. Yes. Xianijia nodded. He didn't know why Ling Tianyu suddenly wanted to challenge Lin Yi, but according to the rules of the competition, there was no problem. Moreover, Lin Yi couldn't refuse. Can I ask why you chose me? Lin Yi asked curiously. It was not strange for someone like Ling Tianyu to take the path of challenging those at a higher level. But instead of those disciples of the Archaic Alliance, he chose him. Did he think that he was a pushover? Forgive me for being presumptuous, but I am purely curious. Ling Tianyu nodded slightly. Curious? That's a little interesting. Lin Yi couldn't help but be amused. He turned to Xianijia and said, Then can we start now? Yes, we can. Only after the challenge is over will we start the competition by drawing lots. Xianijia nodded and then reminded in a low voice, Martial Uncle, This Ling Tianyu is not to be trifled with. You must be careful. If you lose to someone at a higher level, not only will you lose face, you will also lose the qualification to participate in the competition. Although this sentence was not said clearly, everyone knew that it was the truth. In this grand competition, even disciples who were at a disadvantage in a battle of the same level would be disqualified. If they were defeated by someone who was a level higher than them, then there was no need to say anything more. I know. Lin Yi smiled indifferently. This Ling Tianyu seemed a little unfathomable. Unfortunately, he was in existence comparable to a magnate realm expert. No matter how strong Ling Tianyu's aptitude was, he was just a seedling in Lin Yi's eyes. There was really nothing to worry about. Challenging someone of a higher level would attract a lot of attention, and everyone retreated to the side, leaving Lin Yi and Ling Tianyu alone. Then, sorry for offending you. Ling Tianyu cupped his hands with a smile, and then slowly took out a silk belt from his bosom in front of everyone. Everyone was puzzled. Could this silk belt be his weapon? This Ling Tianyu is said to be a god. Why would he use such a sissy weapon? Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. That's right. Our archaic alliance has always attached importance to weapons, and all the cultivation of the Thousand Blades faction is based on weapons. As the young master of the Thousand Blades faction, Ling Tianyu should have inherited a divine weapon. Why would he use a sissy silk belt? It doesn't look like a big deal. Someone frowned and muttered. Not only them but even Bing Wuqing, Xue Jianfeng and Xan Yijie were staring at the ribbon fluttering in the air. They were all experts in the gold core stage, but none of them would underestimate Ling Tianyu. After all, he was someone who could become the leader of the Thousand Blades sect. Chapter 5177. As far as the disciples of the Thousand Blades faction were concerned, even ordinary disciples in the Foundation establishment realm could control more than a dozen weapons at the same time. Those with better aptitude could control dozens of weapons at the same time. However, it was very difficult for them to advance further. When they reached the nascent soul realm, they could at most control 100 weapons at the same time. Lin Yi had only roughly studied the Thousand Blades sect's practitioner's arts, but he knew where the difficulties lay. The biggest difficulty lay in multitasking. Controlling each weapon required a part of one's attention, and it wasn't easy for a normal person to do two things at the same time. Controlling 100 weapons at the same time required 100 multitasking. Even an idiot could figure out how difficult this was. It was definitely at an inhuman level. However, the Ling Tianyu in front of him was puzzling. He did not show a lot of weapons like the other disciples of the Thousand Blades faction. Instead, he only showed a ribbon that seemed to be harmless. What did this mean? Was he hiding his strength? Or was this inconspicuous ribbon his trump card? Lin Yi did not move. He just stood there quietly waiting for Ling Tianyu's next move. At his level, it was impossible for him to treat the other party as a real threat. However, he would not underestimate the enemy. He was observing Ling Tianyu and coping with all changes by remaining unchanged. While Lin Yi was observing Ling Tianyu was also observing his reaction. As he said, he was indeed very curious about Lin Yi. A powerful primordial spirit expert, the martial granduncle of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, Lin Yi was a mystery to all the disciples of the primordial age. Although Ling Tianyu had not made any moves in the past 10 months, he felt that it was necessary to understand Lin Yi's background in both the short and long term. Otherwise, there would be one more uncontrollable factor in the upcoming primordial trial. Suddenly, the ribbon that was fluttering in the air became taut with a swish. Then, with a piercing sound, it shot toward Lin Yi like a sharp arrow. Everyone's expression changed when they saw this. To be able to have such power, it seemed that this ribbon was indeed not an ordinary item. Facing the ribbon that was rushing toward him, Lin Yi was still unmoved. Until the ribbon was less than half a foot away from him, he stretched out 2 fingers and calmly clamped it. Xan Yijie nodded secretly. This scene seemed ordinary, but it was not easy to be as calm as Lin Yi. At least no one present could do it. Even he, a master in the early stage of Gold Core realm, dared not guarantee it. However, the ribbon did not stop after being clamped. Instead, it wriggled wildly like a snake. But in the eyes of others, it was just a futile struggle. After all, how could a soft ribbon do any damage? However, Lin Yi's expression changed. He chose to let go of it without hesitation. Almost at the same time when he let go, a large number of flying needles suddenly shot out from the ribbon. This scene was so sudden that everyone present gasped and looked horrified. Almost all of them were deceived by the inconspicuous shape of the ribbon. They did not expect that there were so many flying needles hidden in the ribbon. If it had been them, they would have already been pierced by the flying needles and died without a burial ground with just one move. It was a pity that Ling Tianyu was facing Lin Yi. Even if these flying needles were hidden very well and almost integrated with the ribbon, it was difficult to be detected by the divine sense under normal circumstances. However, Lin Yi not only had a far more sensitive divine sense than ordinary people, but also a beast-like sense of danger. If he did not detect them in advance, how could he suddenly let go of the ribbon? What a powerful movement technique! Ling Tianyu's eyes brightened. What shocked him was not that Lin Yi could detect them in advance, but that Lin Yi could calmly dodge the sudden attack of the flying needles at such a close distance and come out unscathed. With Ling Tianyu's identity, his sparring partners in the Thousand Blades sect were at least in the Gold Core stage. However, even if they were experts in the Gold Core stage, they could at most block his flying needles with their protective genuine chi. No one had ever been able to dodge it completely like Lin Yi. Such a movement technique was simply unheard of and unseen. Likewise, to be able to practice the legendary flying blades of 1,000 blades, Your Excellency, is also not simple. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Flying blades of 1,000 blades? Hearing this, everyone was shocked again. They carefully counted the number of flying needles flying in the air at this moment. Only then did they exclaim in shock, 999 flying needles in that ribbon. It really is a flying blades of 1,000 blades. How is this possible? Isn't the 1,000 blades flying together just an illusory legend? Ling Tianyu can actually do it? Even though they had seen it with their own eyes, they still felt it was incredible. One had to know that the 100 blades simultaneous release was already very impressive. Even the experts of the 1,000 Blades faction had to be at least nascent soul realm old monsters to be able to do it. Multitasking wasn't something that could be practiced just because one wanted to. If one didn't have enough aptitude, it would be useless even if one practiced for thousands of years. As for the 1,000 Blades simultaneous release, that required one to multitask 1,000 times. The difficulty was more than 10,000 times that of multitasking. This wasn't something that humans could do. But the truth was right in front of them. Ling Tianyu, who was merely at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm, had managed to achieve the legendary 1,000 blades flying together. Was he even human? No wonder everyone in the 1,000 Blades sect supports him to be the sect leader. He's such an amazing genius. No wonder. Xianijia finally understood. Regarding the matter of Ling Tianyu becoming the sect leader of the 1,000 Blades sect, the entire Archaic Alliance had different guesses, including the higher-ups of the various archaic sects and families. No matter how talented he was, it was too childish to let Ling Tianyu, who was only at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm, become the sect leader of a sect. But now that he had seen the 1,000 Blades flying together with his own eyes, Xianijia finally understood that the 1,000 Blades sect was not stupid. Instead, it was because they had found a powerful backer. Once this Ling Tianyu grew up, no one in the entire Archaic Alliance would be his opponent. At that time, the 1,000 Blades sect would definitely sweep away the declining trend and have a promising future. Not only Xianijia but even Bing Wuqing, who was next to him, was moved. Ling Tianyu, who had achieved the 1,000 blades flying together, could not be measured by common sense. Even if he was only at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm, he was enough to be on an equal footing with experts in the Gold Core stage. If time passed, even they would have to look up to him. Chapter 5178. He had always thought that he was worthy of his title as the number one in the Foundation establishment realm and could suppress Ling Tianyu. Now that he thought about it, it was really ridiculous. In front of the 1,000 flying blades, he, the so-called number one in the Foundation establishment realm, was nothing. No, this Ling Tianyu must be eliminated while he was still young. Otherwise he would definitely be a great trouble in the future. Although he was proud, Shui Jianfeng was not a fool. It was true that he was an early-stage Gold Core realm expert, had a father who was the deputy head of the Snowsword faction, and had a mysterious and powerful backer in the center. But all of these were nothing in front of Ling Tianyu's 1,000 flying blades. Such a threat must be nipped in the bud. Your Excellency has good eyesight. I admire you. Ling Tianyu was slightly taken aback. He didn't expect Lin Yi's observation skills to be so sharp that he could count the number of flying needles in an instant. If it wasn't for his reminder, the others might not have realized this so quickly. You're too polite. I didn't expect to see the glory of the 1,000 flying blades today. The Archaic Alliance is really full of talents. But it's a pity? Lin Yi shook his head meaningfully. What's a pity? Ling Tianyu looked at him and asked. Everyone present was also curious. This was the legendary 1,000 flying blades. What was there to pity about? Of course it's a pity that your current realm is too low. Given time, you can indeed become an expert. As for now, you're still far from that level, Lin Yi said bluntly in front of everyone. Everyone looked at him, thinking that this guy really knew how to show off. They didn't know that what Lin Yi said was the truth. Ling Tianyu's 1,000 flying blades was indeed real, but his 1,000 flying blades were all insignificant flying needles. All of them added up didn't even weigh half a gene. Even if it was the 1,000 flying blades, it was only the weakest version. It was fine to scare others, but it was unrealistic to scare Lin Yi. Moreover, with the strength of Lin Yi's body, let alone the weakest version, even if the 1,000 flying blades were real divine weapons, he would at most be a formidable opponent. How could he be scared? Really? Then I'll have to ask for your guidance. Although Ling Tianyu still had a gentle expression on his face, he was, after all, the young master of the Thousand Blades sect, a supreme figure who had mastered the flying blades technique. It would be strange if his arrogance wasn't provoked by Lin Yi's words. Go ahead. Lin Yi smiled faintly and made a gesture of invitation. However, in the eyes of the people around him, it was pure pretentiousness. Ling Qinyu's expression froze. His 10 fingers moved slightly, and the 999 flying needles floating in the air instantly condensed on the ribbon. The ribbon twisted back and forth, and the tip twisted into the shape of a snake's head. At first glance, it looked exactly like a hydralisk with long thorns all over its body. The hydralisk danced rapidly in the air, whistling fiercely. Its momentum was terrifying, and the onlookers could not help but tremble with fear. Even Xianijia, a master in the early stage of Gold Core, felt his eyelids twitching. Only Lin Yi, who was in the field, was not in a hurry. Instead, the corner of his mouth slightly raised to reveal a playful smile. After hovering for a moment, the hydralisk suddenly pounced on Lin Yi from behind. Its speed was extremely fast, but Lin Yi was faster. He easily dodged it with a flash. It's only martial granduncle. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't be able to dodge this attack. Xianijia commented. This was not a compliment to Lin Yi, but the truth. The attack of the hydralisk was so fast that even with his body movement, it was impossible for him to avoid it easily. Looking at the whole field, there was no other person except Lin Yi. No matter how fast your body movement is, can you avoid the divine dragon's tail whip? Ling Tianyu was extremely confident. The hydralisk was covered with flying needles. In the face of such an attack, ordinary people's first reaction was not to face it head-on. They were not only afraid of pain but also afraid of poison. Therefore, Lin Yi's response was completely within his expectation. The hydralisk was more than 3 feet long, and it had already surrounded Lin Yi. Therefore, no matter how Lin Yi dodged, it was impossible for him to avoid this long-prepared move. Divine Dragon's Tail Whip? Lin Yi smiled and released a murderous aura of the 5 elements. Why don't we see whose dragon is more powerful? The dragon roared, and the murderous aura of the 5 elements immediately met the hydralisk. Then, with a loud bang, the hydralisk was torn into pieces, and the flying needles fell to the ground. How could this be? Ling Tianyu couldn't help but turn pale. He was very confident in his move. Even an expert in the early stage of Gold Core realm said that it was difficult to deal with the Divine Dragon's Tail Whip. He didn't expect that it would be easily broken by Lin Yi. Moreover, it was a domineering way of meeting force with force. More importantly, it was only a stream of genuine qi. How could there be such a terrifying genuine qi in the world? Was this person really only at the peak of Foundation establishment? Only Lin Yi himself was not surprised. No matter how powerful the 1,000 blades flying together was, could it be more powerful than the murderous aura of the 5 elements? There is always someone better than you. There is nothing strange about this, right? Lin Yi smiled faintly and said, if the 1,000 blades flying together only has this little strength, it is too disappointing. In his view, the hydralisk that Ling Tianyu made was not ordinary. At first glance, it seemed to be in line with the principle that the weapons of the 1,000 Blades sect complemented each other. But this principle was only for ordinary disciples. For a genius like Ling Tianyu, it was too mediocre. If the legendary 1,000 blades flying together was really used in this way, it would be useless. Really? My skills are not good enough. I have embarrassed myself in front of you. Ling Tianyu looked as calm as usual at this time, without the slightest hint of worry. However, the movements of his hands did not stop at all. After the flying needles fell, they did not recondense on the ribbon. Instead, they simply formed their own formation. At first glance, they looked like a dense swarm of bees. Although the attacks between them seemed messy, they cooperated with each other, as if there was some kind of profound military strategy. Oh, arrangement, this is a little interesting. Lin Yi controlled the murderous aura of the 5 elements to deal with these flying needles with great interest. The more he fought, the more shocked he became. This Ling Tianyu's talent was really very high. In terms of power, although the flying needles were far inferior to the hydralisk, they had become more difficult to deal with now that they had broken up into smaller groups. Just a little interesting? Ling Tianyu smiled. Before his voice died away, the swarm of flying needle bees, which had been big and small just a moment ago, became even more scattered. Almost every flying needle was fighting on its own. The power of each attack became weaker, but at the same time, it became more frequent and harder to guard against. Chapter 5179. If these flying needles were poisoned, Lin Yi would have been a corpse long ago. Shui Jianfeng sneered at the scene. For him, both Lin Yi and Ling Tianyu were targets that had to be eliminated. Unfortunately, because of the order from the higher-ups of the center, he did not have the guts to touch Lin Yi at all. Ling Tianyu was the lifeblood of the Thousand Blades faction. If he touched this guy, the entire Thousand Blades faction would have to fight him to the death. With his current strength, it was tantamount to setting himself on fire. Humph, the Thousand Blades faction used to be one of the 4 major sects and families. Although it has declined now, it is still a decent faction. As the head of the Thousand Blades faction, how could Ling Tianyu use such insidious and despicable means? Xianijie glanced at Shui Jianfeng disdainfully. A gentleman would not do such a thing, but it was obvious that Shui Jianfeng did not feel any pressure at all. Shui Jianfeng snorted disdainfully. If it was in the past, he would still care about his image, but after being crippled twice, his temperament had changed greatly. Especially now that he was secretly relying on the center, he would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. Sinister methods like poison were naturally not a problem. At this time, Bing Wuqing suddenly said, "Even if the needles are really poisoned, Ling Tianyu cannot hurt Lin Yi at all." What? Everyone was shocked when they heard this. After a closer look, they finally found that although the 999 flying needles of Ling Tianyu had surrounded Lin Yi so tightly that it was impossible to defend against them, so far Lin Yi had not been pierced by a single needle. 90% of the flying needles were dodged by Lin Yi's body movement. As for the remaining 10%, every time they got close to Lin Yi, they were blocked by his protective genuine qi and could not advance an inch, let alone cause any damage. What a strong protective genuine qi! Everyone was shocked. At the level of Foundation Establishment consummation, the strength of the protective genuine qi was indeed strong enough to block ordinary punches, palms, and blunt weapons. But Ling Tianyu's flying needles were almost the natural enemy of protective genuine qi. It only took 1% of protective genuine qi to defend against ordinary attacks, but 10% of protective genuine qi was needed to defend against flying needles. Lin Yi was just a peak Foundation Establishment expert. He wasn't even a golden core stage expert, so how could his protective qi be so strong? Diske, no matter how strong his protective jin qi is, what's the point? Even if Lin Yi can hold on for a while, he won't be able to withstand it for long. Sooner or later he will be exhausted to death by Ling Tianyu. In my opinion, Lin Yi, this salted fish, can't turn over a new leaf. How dare he call himself the martial granduncle of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island? This time he was successfully challenged by someone who was a level higher than him, and he was the first one. You've really lost all your face. Shui Jianfeng took the opportunity to ridicule. Xianijie frowned but did not refute. At least from the current situation, Lin Yi was not in a good situation. As long as he could not get rid of the attack of 999 flying needles, he could only rely on his protective genuine qi to fight with Ling Tianyu. Moreover, every time Ling Tianyu consumed a little bit of his protective genuine qi, he would consume 10 or even 100 of his protective genuine qi. Bing Wuqing, on the other hand, was full of disapproval, but she did not show it on her face. After all, he had fought with Lin Yi before. Even he, a golden core late-stage expert, couldn't do anything to Lin Yi, let alone Ling Tianyu, who was only at the peak of the Foundation Establishment late stage. As for Ling Shan and the others, they were even less worried. Even if they could not see anything with their level, they had absolute confidence in Lin Yi. 1,000 flying needles were nothing. As time passed, Lin Yi was still trapped in the attack of 999 flying needles. The situation was as tense as before. This kind of battle of attrition was within everyone's expectations. However, what surprised them was that Lin Yi had been holding on until now without a scratch. What was even more ridiculous was that he seemed to be at ease, and did not seem to be at the end of his rope. This kid could really hold on. Shui Jianfeng furrowed his brows. Compared to Ling Tianyu, who was a potential formidable opponent, Shui Jianfeng's brows furrowed. Compared to Ling Tianyu, who was a potential rival, he was more inclined to humiliate Lin Yi. After all, there was a bloody feud between him and Lin Yi. He immediately said, Uncle Xen, it's almost the time for 2 incense sticks to burn. Are we going to let them continue like this? It's completely meaningless. There should be a time limit, right? There is no time limit. There are only 2 results in all the battles of the trial competition. Either the winner is decided directly, or someone admits defeat. There is no third possibility. Xanijia glanced at him and curled his lips. You're talking about a normal competition, but this is a cross-level challenge. We can't keep dragging on, can we? Are we going to let everyone wait like this? It's been 2 incense sticks time, anyone can tell who is stronger. Uncle Xen, are you being selfish and siding with the Green Cloud sex people from the North Island? Shui Jianfeng said in a strange tone. Oh? Who is stronger and who is weaker? Why can't I see it? Why don't you Shui Jianfeng tell us? Xanijia snorted. Of course. Shui Jianfeng was about to say that Linyi was obviously going to lose, but Linyi suddenly flashed and appeared in front of Ling Tianyu. Shui Jianfeng was speechless and the others were also in an uproar. Linyi had been trapped for so long, and everyone thought that he was at his wit's end. Who would have thought that he would come out just like that? Was this guy teasing Ling Tianyu all the time? Everyone was dumbfounded, and Ling Tianyu, as the person involved, was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. The speed that Linyi showed before was frightening enough, but his speed was several times faster than before. It was hard to imagine such an amazing speed. But compared to this, there was something else that shocked Ling Tianyu even more. His 999 flying needles had surrounded Linyi tightly, with no openings or openings at all. How did Linyi get out unscathed? Before Ling Tianyu could make a further response, Linyi had lost the interest to continue playing with him. What greeted him was an unstoppable 1,000 legs of frenzy. After all, Linyi had almost tested Ling Tianyu's strength. Although Ling Tianyu had unlimited potential, he was still far from being able to make a name for himself. There was still a long way to go. Linyi's 1,000 legs of frenzy was extremely fast, and he appeared very abruptly, so it was even more difficult to guard against it. Even an expert in the early stage of Gold Core like Xanijia could not avoid it completely. However, Ling Tianyu took advantage of the situation and rolled on the ground, dodging the oncoming frenzy 1,000 kicks. Although he looked a little ragged, it was still enough to make Linyi look at him in a higher light. Even the people around him gasped in admiration. Chapter 5180. Stop. I admit defeat. Ling Tianyu shouted at the last moment. Only Linyi could retract his leg at this moment. If it was someone else, he would have kicked Ling Tianyu away. However, Linyi withdrew his leg effortlessly. He looked at Ling Tianyu meaningfully and thought to himself, this guy is really not easy to deal with. All geniuses were prideful. Even if a peerless genius like Ling Tianyu looked gentle and low-key on the surface, he was absolutely prideful in the bottom of his heart. This kind of person was usually very prideful. Even if they were forced into a desperate situation, it would be more difficult than ascending to the heavens to make them admit defeat. Unexpectedly, Ling Tianyu chose to admit defeat so decisively. Moreover, he was as calm as usual from the beginning to the end, without the slightest expression of shame or embarrassment. Just this temperament alone was already extremely remarkable. With extraordinary talent and profound shrewdness, even Linyi had to admit that Ling Tianyu would be a formidable figure in the future if he really grew up. Well, I hereby announce that Linyi wins. Xanijia announced on the spot. Everyone had not recovered from the shock until now. They were still immersed in the rhythm of the stalemate just now, but the winner was actually decided in the blink of an eye. This was too fucking sudden. Linyi looked indifferent. He turned around and was about to leave the arena. At this time, Ling Tianyu suddenly said behind him, "May I ask you a question?" "Speak." Linyi turned his head and looked at him. "How did you get rid of my flying needles just now?" Ling Tianyu asked. Logically speaking, his flying needles should have covered all 360 degrees without any blind spots, but Linyi was able to get out of it so easily and he wasn't hurt at all. It was really confusing. In fact, he was not the only one who had this question. Everyone present also had this question. The only exception was Bing Wuqing. She was the only one who had seen Linyi's semi-primordial spirit state. Think about it yourself. Linyi smiled faintly. He was not stupid. The semi-primordial spirit state was his biggest trump card now. How could he reveal it to others so casually, especially in such a public place with so many eyes? Alright, then I'll seek your guidance next time. Ling Tianyu didn't continue pestering him. There was still a faint smile on his face, and he didn't look like a loser who had just admitted defeat. Although he had indeed lost, it was just an insignificant match after all. He still had a trump card that he hadn't used yet. After all, there was no need to use it unless it was absolutely necessary. Compared to his life-saving trump card, what was the big deal about admitting defeat and surrendering? Shui Jianfeng was speechless when he saw this scene. For him, the ideal situation for Lin Yi to fight against Ling Tianyu was for both sides to suffer. But now both of them were completely unscathed. Ling Tianyu, this brat, admitted defeat just like that. Instead, he acted as if they appreciated each other's talents. It was truly a pain in the ass. After both of them returned to their respective teams, Xanijia continued to ask in a loud voice, "Who else wants to challenge a higher level?" This time no one made a sound. Even a supreme character like Ling Tianyu had lost. It could be seen how difficult it was to challenge someone of a higher level. This was tantamount to a heavy blow to their heads. They didn't dare to act rashly anymore. Challenging someone of a higher level was not a small matter. Not everyone would be as lenient as Lin Yi. What if they didn't have eyes and picked a ruthless person? What if the other party attacked ruthlessly or even killed you? There was no rule that no one could kill you in this competition. Of course, the silence was only temporary. There were many people who were ready to make a move. It was just that the rules had just been announced, and they hadn't found a suitable target to challenge yet. In another 2 days. When they were almost ready, those who had the strength and confidence to challenge someone of a higher level would really emerge. In that case, let's start drawing lots. Xanijia immediately arranged for each team to draw lots. Although it was a little complicated, there were less than 100 people in total. He could handle it all by himself. The first to start was the strongest team of Foundation Establishment Perfection. Including Lin Yi and Shui Jianfeng, there were only 8 people in total. They were all core disciples of various primordial sects, and they were all leading senior brothers. The duel between them almost represented the competition of the strongest disciples of their respective sections. It could be said to be full of gimmicks and naturally attracted attention. After the results of the drawing lots were out, Xanijia took a look and smiled. He shook his head and sighed. It's a pity that the entire Primordial Alliance wasn't mobilized for this trial in the secular world. Only the Central Island Alliance and the North Island Alliance were gathered. Otherwise, we could really make a ranking of the strongest disciples of the Primordial Alliance. The 8 people drew lots for 4 teams. Although Lin Yi had just fought a fierce battle with Ling Tianyu, he didn't receive any special treatment. Of course, he could also choose to forfeit, but then he would only have 4 chances left. He had to win 3 out of 4 to qualify for the trial. It should be known that it was pure bad luck to be picked by someone to challenge someone of a higher level than him. If he lost, he would be eliminated. Even if he won, there would be no benefit. Not to mention that his true chi would be wasted, he would also have to participate in the competition of the same level. It couldn't be helped. The rules were cruel. They didn't ask for fairness, only survival of the fittest. After all, the trial competition was to prepare for the primordial trials, and there was no such thing as fairness in the primordial trials. Let alone this kind of battle, there was no such thing as fairness in the primordial trials. Shui Jianfeng rubbed his palms together. He wanted to take this opportunity to teach Lin Yi a good lesson. Although he had absolute confidence in his strength as an early-stage gold core expert, since Lin Yi had just been exhausted by Ling Tianyu, it would be a waste not to take advantage of this situation and save some energy. Unfortunately, the result of the draw didn't go his way. In the end, Shui Jianfeng didn't encounter Lin Yi. Instead, he encountered the leading senior brother of another primordial sect. He couldn't help but curse his bad luck. Fortunately, he still had 4 chances. Every time they drew a new lot, it was theoretically very easy for them to draw the same opponent. If it was a coincidence, it was possible for them to draw the same opponent 5 times. This was one of the special rules of this trial tournament. Not only was it a test of raw strength, but it was also a test of everyone's ability to adapt and recover. Any weakness in this aspect could become a fatal flaw. Of course, if luck wasn't on his side, this sort of rule could very well cause Shui Jianfeng to miss out on Lin Yi in this competition, and Shui Jianfeng would have to save his revenge for the primeval trials. Chapter 5181. At the same time, Shui Jianfeng's side was also like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. After all, he had the foundation of the first person in the Foundation Establishment realm. Even if he didn't reveal the strength of the early stage of Gold Core, it was still easy for him to deal with ordinary experts in the peak of Foundation Establishment realm. With the 2 of them as the foundation, all the 4 matches of the disciples in the peak of Foundation Establishment realm ended very quickly. The total time spent was only half an hour, much faster than Xanijia had expected. After the peak of Foundation Establishment realm, the next match was between the disciples in the late stage of Foundation Establishment realm. Among them, the one who received the most attention was naturally Ling Tianyu, who had just failed in his cross-level challenge. Although his strength was unparalleled among those at the same level as him, he had just consumed a lot of genuine qi on Lin Yi. More importantly, his moves and routines were seen clearly by others. It was enough time for him to come up with a countermeasure. With all these disadvantages added together, he was no longer a strong enemy to be avoided in the eyes of others, but a ready-made soft persimmon, which made the other disciples in the late stage of Foundation establishment realm restless. If they could defeat Ling Tianyu today, it would not be as simple as a victory for them. More importantly, it would be enough to make them famous and gain both fame and fortune. The benefits were self-evident. However, it turned out that Ling Tianyu was Ling Tianyu after all. As the young head of the Thousand Blade sect, he was definitely not someone that ordinary people could mess with. His defeat to Lin Yi only highlighted Lin Yi's strength, but absolutely did not mean that he was weak. At least in front of these experts at the same level as him, Ling Tianyu was invincible. So what if his moves and routines were seen clearly by others? Putting aside the fact that his flying blades of thousand blades was not so easy to crack, he didn't even need to use it to deal with these experts at the same level as him. He could casually launch 100 blades of thousand blades and no one could block it. Like Lin Yi and Xue Jianfeng, Ling Tianyu also easily finished the match in one move. In the face of his overwhelming strength, these disciples in the late stage of Foundation establishment realm could only accept the fate of being crushed. As for becoming famous after one battle, they really thought too much. One match after another, the strength of the disciples decreased from high to low. Following that was the competition between disciples in the later stage of Foundation building realm, the peak of the middle stage of Foundation building realm, the middle stage of Foundation building realm and the peak of the early stage of Foundation building realm. Since Exanijia was the only judge and the space was limited, there could only be one duel at a time. Naturally, it would take a long time, but fortunately the total number of people wasn't too high. As long as there were no accidents, the arrangement of one round every 2 days was already very lenient. Without Lin Yi, Xue Jianfeng and Ling Tianyu, the rest of the duels were obviously much more boring. The only exception was a duel between Foundation building realm cultivators in the later stages of the Foundation building realm. That was because there was also a hot topic in this duel, Lung Lung. Thinking back, when she first came to the secular world, she was only in the early stage of Foundation establishment. Ever since she got to know Lin Yi, her strength had risen rapidly. After taking a stroll outside, she was already in the middle stage of Foundation establishment. Now, after a few months of hard cultivation on the Transfer Islands, her strength had skyrocketed to the late stage of Foundation establishment. She was even only a step away from the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment. All in all, it had only been 10 months. She had advanced by leaps and bounds from the early stage of Foundation establishment to the late stage of Foundation establishment. Such a miracle might not be unparalleled in the ancient Jianghu, but it was definitely unprecedented. Moreover, Lung Lung wasn't someone without strength for nothing. Her crushed ice physique was 1 in a million. Once the advantage of it was truly developed, it would be no small matter. With Lung Lung's strength, it was naturally much easier for her to deal with an ordinary expert of the same level. It was just that she had yet to find a way to fully unleash the power of the crushed ice physique. Therefore, she wasn't as shocked as Lin Yi and the others. The whole process was without any surprises or danger. However, there was a little accident at the end. Lung Lung had a breakthrough on the spot. Although this was rare, it was not unheard of. During a duel, the state of one's essence, qi and spirit would be elevated to the best. If one was already on the verge of a breakthrough, it wasn't strange for one to accidentally take advantage of the situation to break through. It was just that this would easily give the opponent an opportunity to take advantage of. That person had already been beaten up by Lung Lung to the point that he had no strength to fight back. If it wasn't for Lung Lung's mercy, he would have been beaten to the ground long ago. At this moment, when he saw an opportunity to fight back, he couldn't care less about etiquette and honor. He quickly waited for the opportunity to strike. Compared to being scolded for being shameless, it was more beneficial to get the victory in his hands. However, before he could make a move, he suddenly felt a chill on his back. An inexplicable vital energy actually entered his head in a single line. His entire person was instantly stunned. Until Lung Lung successfully broke through to the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment, he didn't dare to move an inch. He muttered and doubted everything, looking as if he had lost his soul. Everyone thought that he was frightened by Lung Lung's crushed ice physique. Little did they know that Lin Yi was the mastermind behind all this. Just like that, Lung Lung took the first victory without any mishaps. At the same time, she also stepped into the threshold of the late stage of foundation establishment. From the next round onwards, she would be competing with those late-stage foundation establishment disciples on the same stage. If luck was on her side, her next opponent might be Ling Tianyu. Without further ado, when all the teams above the early stage of foundation establishment had finished, an entire day had passed. Other than those disciples who were heavily injured and needed to rest quietly, the others had been waiting at the side the whole time. Although Xianijia didn't forbid them from moving freely, as long as it wasn't their turn to draw lots, they could totally go back and rest. However, no one was willing to give up this great opportunity to observe the other disciples. After all, they might be their future opponents. Only by knowing oneself and knowing the enemy could one gain the upper hand. Ling Shan and the others were observing as well, exchanging their opinions from time to time. Although they didn't have the intention to challenge those who were of a higher level than them, since the previous battles weren't against early-stage foundation establishment disciples, they wouldn't be their opponents in the future. At first glance, it seemed like they were doing useless work, and they might as well rest and build up their strength like the other early-stage foundation establishment disciples. However, to them this day of observation was quite fruitful. In the past 3 days they had already memorized what Linny had taught them, and they had also practiced the counter moves that Linny had come up with more than 100 times. However, that was just theory after all. It was hard to say if it would actually be of any use. Chapter 5182. Finally, Xianijia announced loudly, "Next, we'll begin drawing lots for the Foundation Establishment disciples. First match, Luo Shaxing of Snow Sword Sect against Ling Shan of the Common World." With that, Xue Jianfeng's eyes lit up. He didn't have much of a relationship with Luo Shaxing, but he was still a disciple of the Snow Sword Sect. This was a great opportunity. "Brother Luo, can I talk to you?" Xue Jianfeng hooked his finger at Luo Shaxing. Xue Jianfeng was no longer a cripple. With his strength and status, there was naturally no one in the Snow Sword School who would disobey him. Luo Shaxing was immediately overwhelmed by the favor. He immediately followed Xue Jianfeng and said with a fawning expression, "What instructions does senior brother Xue have for me? How confident are you against this Ling Shan?" Xue Jianfeng asked casually. 10. Luo Shaxing said confidently. He had already been an early-stage foundation establishment expert for more than 10 years. Even though he had not broken through, that was only because he did not have any medicinal pills. Among all the early-stage foundation establishment disciples in the Snow Sword School, he was one of the best. Right now, he was only facing a newcomer who had just broken through and had an unstable foundation. Furthermore, it was a woman from the secular world. If he could still lose, he could go eat shit. That's good. This battle concerns the face of our Snow Sword Sect and we can't lose, but... Xue Jianfeng looked at Ling Shan from head to toe, killing intent flashing in his eyes. Luo Shaxing followed his gaze and looked over. He rolled his eyes and said, "I know. Don't worry, senior brother Xue. I will stop when the time is right. I will not be ruthless." Ling Shan was, after all, a rare beauty, and he thought that Xue Jianfeng was eyeing her. "Wrong, I want you to do the exact opposite." Xue Jianfeng smiled coldly. He did think about Ling Shan before, and not just her but the other beauties like Ziyu as well. If it weren't for Shirhan and Cheng Yi staying in the common world, he'd even think about taking out Lin Yi's harem. But now wasn't the time to be obsessed with beauties. As long as he was strong enough, he could have as many beauties as he wanted. The most important thing right now was to attack Lin Yi. The exact opposite? What do you mean? Luo Shaxing was stunned. "Very simple, I want you to kill her," Xue Jianfeng said in a deep voice. "Kill?" Shaoxing jumped in fright. His name was Shaoxing and he'd killed quite a lot of people in the past, but facing a beauty like Ling Shan, he really couldn't bring himself to do it. Plus, this was the tournament and while killing wasn't prohibited, he wouldn't do it unless there was a huge grudge. "That's right. In the future, as long as it's Lin Yi's people, I'll reward them handsomely for every one of them I kill. Otherwise, it means that they are not giving me face." "Do as you see fit," Xue Jianfeng said with a cold snort. "All right, senior brother Xue, just wait and see." At this point, Luo Shaxing didn't hesitate at all. He was an early-phase disciple, and if he offended Xue Jianfeng, he wouldn't be able to survive in the Snow Sword School anymore. Plus, swords had no eyes, and even if he accidentally killed someone in the tournament, he wouldn't have to take any responsibility. Xue Jianfeng was whispering to Luo Shaxing, thinking that he had lowered his voice very much, but he didn't expect Lin Yi's senses to be far above his, a master at the early stage of Golden Core, and he could hear everything clearly. Lin Yi immediately reminded Ling Shan, Be careful later, that guy listened to Shui Jianfeng and he's ready to kill you. If you can't do it, just surrender. Don't risk it, safety first, understand? Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Ling Shan nodded, and under the cheers of the crowd, she walked into the ring with a calm expression, looking quite like a general. Lin Yi nodded to himself. Ling Shan had been training in the department for years, and while her strength hadn't improved much due to the limitations of the environment, her temperament had matured quite a bit. From a certain perspective, this kind of change was even better than the improvement of her strength. Xianijia gave the order, and the battle officially began. Ling Shan didn't plan to attack first, since she was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of raw strength. Attacking first wouldn't give her the upper hand, and would instead expose an opening for the opponent to take advantage of. The best strategy for her was to defend and counterattack. Luo Shaxing smiled at the sight of Ling Shan's posture. If that's the case, then I won't hold back. This blade of mine is called the Life Killer Blade, and when it's drawn, there will be blood. Good luck, miss. He was already looking down on Ling Shan, and now he didn't care about her at all. He pulled his blade out of its sheath and slashed vertically. There didn't seem to be anything special about it at first glance, as if it was just a casual slash from someone underestimating their enemy. You don't even use the snow sword arts and you think you can kill me just like that? Ling Shan frowned and chose to dodge. If it wasn't for Lin Yi's warning, she would have attacked already. She didn't take the bait? Luo Shaxing also frowned. His strike was indeed ordinary. In the eyes of others, it was purely relying on brute force, without the slightest bit of subtlety. Little did they know that this was just a camouflage on the surface. Luo Shaxing looked like a big guy on the surface, but he was actually very shrewd. His attitude of underestimating his enemy was 30% real, but the other 70% was just for show. If Ling Shan were to attack recklessly, she'd be falling right into his trap. His slash looked very crude, but it was actually a very dangerous move. With just a thought, he could turn it into one of the most dangerous moves of the Snow Sword School, the snow-killing form. Ling Shan still didn't know that she'd just walked right in front of death's door. If she really did fall into Luo Shaxing's trap, she wouldn't be able to survive with her current strength, unless Lin Yi forcefully interfered. She'd lose if that happened. She was completely oblivious to all of this, only following Lin Yi's instructions. She held back for a full 10 moves and was forced back by Luo Shaxing. She was in a dangerous situation, but fortunately her early phase strength wasn't just for show. Even if she couldn't win against Luo Shaxing head-on, she could still hold on for a while if she focused on dodging. Haha, I don't know what kind of stupid move Lin Yi gave her, letting Luo Shaxing use the snow form so easily. Is there even a need to fight now? Shui Jianfeng mocked.